Hey everybody, we're back with the Dev Twitch stream. My name is Nick Taylor. I'm a lead software engineer at Forum. Forum is the software that powers Dev.
And I'm Christina Gorton. I am the open source community manager at Forum, and we have our special guest today, Jhey. Jhey, tell us about you. Who are you?
Well, you were going to do the intro. That's what you just said.
Oh, no,
You
no,
lied to
no.
me.
Instead,
You
we'll say who
lied.
you are.
You stitched me up.
That's it, the show's over.
I can go on about you if you'd like. I was just giving
Right.
you a chance to say something about yourself.
Disconnect call. Um, I don't know now. I haven't got anything prepared because I thought you were going to do it.
Okay, I can do it. I can do it. I can do it. You want me to do it? This is Jhey. Jhey does all kinds of animations on the web. That's not all he does, but that's what a lot of people know Jhey for. Amazing animations. They're all over CodePen. If you don't know what CodePen is, you'll probably see us opening that up soon. And he does animations with CSS. He does animations with JavaScript, and he's written books. He teaches. He does Twitch streams. He does all the things, and that is Jhey. And we will be talking more about it here.
Couldn't have done it better, so
There you go.
that was good. That was really good.
It was the best intro I've ever heard. No, cool. Yeah, really appreciate you coming on the stream, Jhey.
To be here.
I've seen a ton of the work you've done, and every time I see it, my mind just goes like, it's like, uh, it's just really great work, and I know you have a lot of fun doing them. And I don't know where you want to start. Maybe do you want to maybe go with like your thought process on how you go about animations, or what do you want to where do you want to jump into in terms of everything?
Well, I guess kind of you kind of touch on like why it all exists, I guess. Like all like why we do all these random
Yeah.
things, like all these fun things, because um and it's just all about learning, really. Like that is it. Like it's all about learning and like sharing process and like showing people kind of like what we said the other day, like about inspiring and just
Yeah.
making people think like, oh, I could do that. Like it's all about kind of like following the idea and not the process. So I could like the kind of thing that I try and think of is try and make the thing that's not like someone else hasn't thought of, or like not even that. Like don't be, I guess, motivated by that, but kind of motivated by your ideas or just thinking of basically stuff that there isn't a tutorial for. Like you're creating that tutorial. Like so, the articles I've written about this are like playfulness in code or like make for yourself. Because you can learn a lot from like tutorials, and it's obviously a rite of passage. People make things like CRUD apps and to-do lists and stuff, but
Yeah.
what do you do after? Like, where do you go next? And you just kind of need to follow like what you enjoy, and kind of it's how you build up all your problem solving. So the animations and things come out of like I started doing GreenSock, I started doing CSS more, and then I was like, I wonder what happened. How would I do that? How would I push this? How would I? And it snowballed, and here I am. So
Oh,
that's kind of like the process, because like I often get asked for things like oh, like what's the course to do that, or like what's the book I need for this, and it's like I don't like. Funny, I just tweeted about this a second ago. Like, so there's a, and I think you did you picked up Josh's new course
yeah.
for
Yeah.
CSS, and I'm sure it's like brilliant. But I often get asked for like CSS course, and it's like something that I'm thinking like, should I do it? Should I not? But I always think if I did a course, like if it's really long and it goes through like by the time you get to the end, will you remember the start? So for me, I like to just try and do stuff like applied. I like to jump in and just like for me, it's all about just trying to push things and learn new stuff. So that's where all the animations come from, because I have fun making them. So I do them on the side, and then I come up with more stuff. So
Yeah.
Yeah, Jhey and I and Nick kind of talked about this when we were talking to Jhey on Monday for a little rehearsal, and this kind of came about of like we've seen a lot of time online, or people say to us, because Jhey and I both kind of do just kind of fun things a lot of times is people will say, why? Like, why do you do that? What's the point? Why are you doing this? And for us, you know, a lot of it is just learning. Like, we want to learn something, we're going to do it in a fun way. Why not?
That's kind of the point I was
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
trying to make, but in a weird way. But like, yeah, like there doesn't tend to be a course for like, or a course or a book for these types of things, because you're trying to flex, like going further beyond what the docs tell you. Like, you know, um, I don't know. It's hard to think of because you just try and think of every like particular use case you make. But say I was doing something a moment ago. I'm trying to make a tutorial for like using Morph SVG,
Hmm.
and like it's yeah, there's great stuff out there for that, and the docs on GreenSock are good anyway. But like, it's often like use something to do, like you go on a tutorial and it will show you like, oh, this is the happy path and this is how you make something. But like, you want to try and work out, right, how do I push this? Like, how do I take it further? How do I do that thing that's not in the docs? I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
know.
Hmm.
Try to make
yeah.
it relatable, but
No, I
Before
think that's a good point. And go ahead, Nick. Go
Oh,
ahead.
I was just gonna say because I know you're both super familiar with the animations. Uh,
Hmm.
I know what GreenSock is, but maybe kind of give the TLDR of what GreenSock is and why you might use it, as opposed to say just CSS animations in general.
Do you want to take that, Jay? You want me to go? Either way.
yeah. Well, I'm sure I'll echo what you're gonna say. So I think we probably have the same kind of opinion on this. So
Yeah.
I well, for like, I tend to go CSS first to an extent. So it depends on the use case. So like, I'll be like, you know, like a spinner or something, or like a simple fade or a transition,
Yeah.
then I'm most likely going to reach for CSS because, you know, I can do it with CSS. And then there becomes that like gray area where people are like, well, I've seen you push CSS to that limit. Like, you can do all that with CSS, but like,
Yeah.
is it really feasible? Is it like maintainable? So
Yep.
I hark back to that challenge we spoke about the other day, and it was like creating timelines. And timelines is a great like point where you're like, right, I need something with more control now. Where you kind of think, right, it's time for JavaScript. You can do it with CSS, like you can
Mhm.
compose your timeline with variables and you can do offset delays and things, but
Okay.
honestly, it's like it's a bit of a maintenance nightmare. And that's when you kind of start reaching for GreenSock. The other side of when you start reaching for GreenSock is when you need to do things that are like particularly hard, I think. So like the
Hmm.
plugins are really good for this. So
Mhm.
um, and it's not just about animation these days. It's like scroll trigger is a great example. Like, I don't want to write intersection observers, and I don't want to write because
Okay.
GreenSock does loads of performance stuff under the hood that we don't even. It's not just an intersection observer running. There's other stuff, magic that we don't
Okay. Yeah.
see,
Yeah.
and it's like just just all those other types of things that you can do like that. And that's the funny thing as well. Like with GreenSock, it's because animation is always so like coupled to visual, and people think animation it's visual, like, but GreenSock will animate anything. It's not just
Mhm.
visuals. Like you are animating visual stuff most of the time, but it's like you can animate a number, you can animate an object's value, and then hook into that. Like that's the real power with that kind of stuff. So I've been trying to show a bit more of that at the moment, and obviously we spoke about it the other day where I was
Yeah.
said I've been banging my head against the wall with this animation. The things you can do with it takes you to another level of kind of power of what you can do. So, for instance, like you make a timeline, you go from like 0 to 20 seconds, and then you make a timeline that's like meta on top of that, and then you say, hey, I'm gonna time travel. Like I'm gonna go for 5 seconds to 10 seconds on that timeline with GreenSock. And then I'm going to use scroll trigger on top of that, and then I'm going to scrub that timeline that scrubs that timeline, and it's like, whoa, you're on like a whole nother level. And it's like, well, yeah, I don't think I'd have been doing that with CSS.
Yeah.
I'll ask some probably obvious stuff to you both, but when you mean scrubbing the timeline, what do you mean exactly? Like I understand the concept of the timeline, so from time zero to whenever, that's just the
So
frames that
like,
you're showing, and then you
I
scrub.
don't know what the I always think so. Obviously, we were just saying like I'm in the UK, so if anyone's in the UK that's ever used a Sky remote, the old Sky remote, like you used to be able to, you know, when you pause live TV
Yeah.
or like
Mhm.
satellite, and then you like use the wheel and you can like scrub back and forward like between,
Oh,
like that's
okay.
what I always think of in my head, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I'm just scrubbing around. But yeah, you can do it with like even when you, I don't know, grab YouTube's timer and you can like move around and stuff.
Okay,
And that's
gotcha.
kind of what you can do with GreenSock, but what you can do is like you can animate that playhead, and like yeah, it just takes it to a whole nother level. It's like a really, it is really cool the stuff you can do with it. Like I've only really recently started playing with that more, and like it kind of opens up a load of things I hadn't even thought about, because yeah, just really cool things. And I, going back to like animating not just things you see, like that then opens up other possibilities. So technically you can animate like audio volume. So,
Okay.
you know, fade in music, fade it back out, like all that kind of stuff. Which is really interesting. So you, when you reach for a tool like that, it's easy to think of visuals, but like you can think outside the box. Like
Okay.
you can do whatever you want with it. I think that's kind of, it's easy to go, yeah, I'm gonna make this box spin. But then when you get further, it's like, well, I can do whatever I want with this box.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
I think that's where, at least from a beginner, because like every time I see someone who does animations really well like yourself, I'm like, I am not a front end. But I there's so many different aspects of front end, obviously. But yeah, like you were saying, like I've done pretty much basic CS animations because that's all I've ever really had to do, like a spinner or like maybe a button. When you press on it or hover it, it just gets a little bigger, stuff like that. And then to go from that to like, I'm sure we'll pull some of these up later, but like, I know you had a recent one talking about a new CSS property called app property, which we can get into after. But
Hmm.
like, it's like a filing cabinet opening, and I'm like, there's definitely skill behind it, but there's definitely an artistic side to it as well, obviously. Like, because like the stuff I've seen you make, it's like, yeah, you could have all the technical to like make things move and stuff, but there still is that like it looks really good. It pops.
Take that. But I think that's yeah, that kind of like harks back to that original point I was trying to make, and like the, like I don't know, like I'm not, I like to try and push things and like that artistic route, and then I like teaching that aspect of like, so I'm probably not great for doing like, I don't know, I can do like starting out stuff, but I always try and show what I'm doing. So like the app property stuff is like, it's not even in browsers across the board yet. It's almost there,
Yeah.
but it's like, I'm gonna write about this. How can I make it stick? And then I'll think of weird sort of demos I can make that kind of show that off. So
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the one was like the stopwatch, right? So the stopwatch like animates time, but it doesn't really animate time. It animates numbers, and it's actually 6 digits that just all animate on their own little loops with different timings.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, like the draws one, that one's actually quite, yeah, that one's quite a weird one, because technically it's showing you like, yeah, there's a HTML element that has like its own attribute and it does it, and you don't have to use JavaScript. But then I've just decided to throw a load of 3D on it, which probably doesn't
Okay.
help people.
Yeah, I think it's the
But I just
3D
feel like that
aspect as
one's a
well.
good. Well, I just feel like that one's a good semantic tie-up, right? Because the attribute is open,
Hmm.
so you know,
Mhm.
open drawers, open a wardrobe, and I can't remember how that. I think that one began because of a code pen challenge, like
Okay.
a
Yeah.
few years back. But yeah, they're always trying to relate to something or trying to push something. That's kind of what, unless I have some weird idea. Like before I came on, I was doing a pocket watch,
Okay.
like a hypnosis, and yeah, that was I'm trying to do this like bending string animation thing to teach like Morph
Had to
SVG, and I was
do that a
like,
few times. It is
yeah, and I was just like,
complicated.
what can I liken this to? And it was
Yeah.
hypnotist watch. Yep, that'll be good. Pocket watch. So I don't know when that will make its way up. Maybe today. I don't know.
And I guess
Yeah.
stuff like that, like I when you like I think a reason a lot of animations look good is because they kind of look to nature, how things really work, like physics and all that. I know we touched a bit about, like, we talked about React Spring briefly and stuff the other day, but in terms of like, I'm assuming GSAP GreenSock has some kind of physics engine in it or something, or how does that all
Yeah.
work?
So you have like an actual physics engine, so you can do like actual gravity stuff, which is really
Okay.
cool. Like if you want to do, I mean, obviously whimsical. Everyone first rite of passage is the confetti cannon. So everyone does confetti cannons with physics. So they have like a plugin, and you can do like you can define angles and gravity settings for particles, and that's another good example actually, because for that you would use like canvas potentially, not just
Okay.
DOM elements. So you could like animate particles and then apply the positions through GSAP. But um, they have like a whole bunch of easing as well to do all these kind of interesting um, ease styles and tricks you can do with it. Like so, obviously easing plays a big part in making animations feel kind of right. But then when you go a bit further, they have like so there was one I found the other day. I did like I tried to do like a neon text intro thing. So I saw an advert for I can't remember what it was, something on TV. It was a film, and it was like they're doing a lot of these like repeated text animation things going on
Mhm.
online at the moment, and it was one of them. So I did my name, and it was like flickered up a load of my name, and then
Okay.
it kind of lit up like neon, and I wanted like a flickering bulb effect, and you can
Mhm.
actually do that with easing. So what
The
you can do
roughies. Is
is
that what you
you can
used?
use a rough ease, which
Yeah.
makes it go jaggedy, but it
Okay.
actually creates like a flicker effect if you use easing on opacity, which is like really interesting
I did
because
that with lightning once. I was like, this is perfect. Ease,
yeah,
rough
so
ease.
like naturally your mind thinks like I just want to flick the opacity on and off, and you're thinking like I'm gonna have to create steps or something to create this flicker effect. But when you actually think about an easing graph, like you can just go beyond the point and come back, and you can create that like
Okay.
flicker
Okay.
effect. So it's like there's a whole nother level to it when you start digging into that kind of stuff, because generally people think there's ease in, ease out, ease in out, linear, and
It might
it's
help if we bring up the GreenSock ease visualizer because that one's very excellent to explain
yeah,
all these for people who don't know easing. Kind of get
especially
yeah. Go ahead,
especially
Jay.
the rough one. I
Hmm.
That's on the visualizer, and that is really good. Like
Yeah.
it would be handy to see because that's like the bonus you get as well, because you can do like cubic Bezier stuff in CSS, but it's like you need to use either cubic Bezier.net or .com, and then it's
Yeah.
like it's
Thinking.
tricky to work all that out, and that's I don't know, it's not lazy, but GreenSock kind of does all this really well for you. You can just go, yeah, I want it randomly, and I want like 50 points of randomness. Do it for
Okay.
me,
Yeah.
and
Because
it just goes ahead and does it, right? So,
I think the typical one people think of with like CSS trying to do like a ease is something where something comes down and it like bounces. And with
oh yeah,
GreenSock, they have the bounce ease. And so like you just say
okay.
bounce and then it will bounce for you. And so that's exactly what like Jay's talking about, where you don't have to think about those things. It makes it a lot easier to just go ahead and create those animations, and where you would probably want to use something like GreenSock
Okay.
versus CSS where you would have to go back and whoever's working with you on a team, like if it's your own projects, these aren't that big of a deal. But when you think of like practically and working with a team, if someone has to go in and fix these things later on or change something, being
Yeah.
able to change one little point on an ease is a lot better than having to change a bunch of percentages on like a CSS animation. And so
Yeah.
that's where they're really helpful.
I can't remember. I had something the other day, and I literally just changed the ease to like elastic, and it fixed my whole problem.
Yeah.
So I can't remember what it was. But yeah, like sometimes you just experiment with them as well, and it just like that feels right. Like
Okay.
often with me, I'll be conceptually I want to get the timeline kind of working, and then after that I'll be like, now I can refine it. Like you get the mechanics working first, then you think, right, now we're good. Now I can actually do this. I think one example would probably be I made like a light bulb toggle where you could like pull the cord and then it would
Okay.
like spring back. And that was like a really good example of like, wow, this looks really simple, but there's a lot of moving parts. So there's like dragging the string, letting go of it, and then making it do like a flicker between like four shapes, and
Okay.
then like flicking on and off. It's like it gets a bit you have to kind of break these things down, and that's kind of where GSAP really helps, because you can just like create separated timelines. I think one of like the first I think like one of the first timeline kind of things I probably made was the bear that turns the checkbox off.
Okay.
And that
That's like,
was
I was looking at that one again today. That's like my favorite.
yeah, and it's like that was a really good learning thing for me because I come from that, like we was chatting the other day, my background was like Java and middleware, and I've always been like on the non-visual side. So my background before I was started doing GreenSock, I'd have been like heavily into React and stuff like that, and I was like, how on earth do I use GSAP with React, and how on earth do I make this bear do this? And it's like, I'll find out. Like that's just how I go about it. And then for that one, I learned about how, you can create a timeline and a function, then add it in and just generate timelines. So you get that like extra kind of
Okay.
randomness as well, which is really cool.
I think I found it. Is it called the impossible light bulb? Is that the one?
No,
I
there's
think,
a impossible checkbox. I can get it. I got it right here. Hold on.
Okay.
yeah, this
I,
one, the one you linked to, Nick, is a different one. That one, that was like the extension of it. So that
oh,
was
okay, okay,
that was the first, that was the second one with the bear opening the door, and then
okay.
there was like let me find it. Let me open with my keyboard to come alive.
Maybe we
I'll
can
ping it in the chat.
share a screen too. We could show some of these. I don't know how well the animations go over on a stream. Like I imagine is there some delay sometimes?
Yeah, I mean, I can share or anyone can share. I don't.
For
Yeah,
some
if you
reason, mine won't share. I tried to bring it up for the GreenSock visualizer, so if one of you all want to pop something up,
yeah,
let's go
I'd say
for it.
you might as well drive Jay since you probably know where everything is. So
Well, you like to think so, but I don't know. Honestly, like it's crazy. I had this the other day, so I've been revisiting some things. So one of the goals I had this year was to try and I've lost all my windows with something because I had to. Okay, here we go. Sorry, I had to
oh yeah,
resize
no
one
worries.
window so I can show you this one.
Mhm.
All right.
Share my screen. Dell. This one.
Yeah. All right.
What do you
Boom.
see? You see like my cursor going crazy?
I
No,
see
all I see
your
is
Dell.
the display.
Yeah, your display
It's
panel for
picking
the
like
Dell.
which display you want.
Oh,
The one with that says gather windows.
oh, that's strange. Oh, I see what's happened here. It's kind of interesting why it's done that. So it chose the actual. What? How's it doing that? Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I see. That should be better. Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, yeah, I see your
Actually sees
VS
something.
Code now, and
That's weird. When you go in Discord and you do the share, it's like applications first, then screens on another tab. And I've not really
Yeah.
had to dig into that one before. Right, let me find this. Mm, that looks good. Now bring it across. Here's
Right
your
now, what
green
we see,
file.
yeah, there we go. There we go.
There we
Starting to
yeah,
see
go.
the.
code.
We got there in the end.
Yay!
So yeah, this is what it started as, and this is kind of a good example actually, because my original idea was, if I open the original. So yeah, the original idea was to do this one,
Okay,
which is the tug and the bear closed the door, but it wasn't how it went at all.
okay.
So I actually ended up making this part first, and then I was like, wow, that was enough work in itself, and then I did the
Yep.
next part. So so like yeah, this one, and this was a really good one to learn because I had this idea of like how I wanted it to work, and you let go and it does the little
Okay.
toggle, but it wasn't like something that I had an idea to start with, but I didn't realize it was going to be as tricky as it was. So for this, there's actually a few things going on. So you can see like the cursor changes here
Okay.
when you go over, and there's actually like an invisible circle there, and that acts as like, and this is why GreenSock forums and the people at GreenSock are really helpful because I wouldn't have known how to do this.
Okay.
But there was what I'm using here is a draggable, and I guess this is another good example of like plugins that you get that aren't necessarily animation related, but like they can be used. So this is like draggable, which allows you just to grab something and move it. And
Okay.
I'm
Yeah,
actually
you can
creating
think
a
of like
proxy.
knobs. People use them for like knob animations and a bunch of other things, but it's
Mm.
just anything that you say, hey, I want this to be draggable, you can then either drag it around or rotate depending on like what you want it to do.
Okay.
So yeah, like
Cool.
here I'm actually proxying the drag handle and then move it. I'm just updating the chord, and then when you let go, the chord just springs back. But what it actually does is it flickers between these four states.
Okay.
So it's kind of hard to show because
Mhm.
I don't see. This is what happens. You make these things and you look back at them and you're like, what am I
It's okay.
doing? Oh, here we go. Yes, I'm doing a for loop.
Okay.
So I'm looping through. And what I'll have done, and it's kind of hard to show here, but I've got the book for it somewhere. Here we go. And people that have like watched me on stream know that this is this always happens. Like I end up scribbling it all, and then I go ahead and make it. So I have like an overhead camera that I use, but you'll be able to see very closely there that
Yep.
there are lines, and they're the different like stages of what happens. So like it
Mhm.
goes uh, straight, curly, straight, curly, straight, curly, curly, straight, something like that. So,
Okay.
and that's just how this stuff kind of works. Like you end up scribbling stuff, working it out, and that's kind of what I'm goes back to like that's kind of what I'm driven by. Try and make something I haven't seen before, or try and push it. But this year I'm trying to actually write more about how this stuff actually works and how you can actually do it because I
Okay.
realize some people are interested in it. So
I'm
For the
curious.
chord,
Sorry, go ahead.
are you using for the different states? Are you using morph SVG to make them morph into the?
yeah. Yeah, so that's
Okay.
that's a morph between I guess I can pull this down for a second. Yeah, that's like a morph between the two between the three states. So there's like the three
Mhm.
different chord shapes and
Okay.
yeah, it just quickly triggers between them. But the first ease is like a spring back into
Okay.
that and then it just
Okay.
like bounced between them with a morph. Um
Okay.
yeah, they're
Yeah, for people
pretty
who don't know, morph SVG is really helpful. So morphing things with an animation, if you go from like one state to another, you can do it without plugins. GreenSock makes it really easy that you will take one state, like how you want something initially, and then you have something that you want like later on, and it will morph between that. So it will take those points of like the SVG that you have, and it will go from one state to the other and actually make it look nice.
Okay.
Because that can be hard to do. And so he's got these strings that he has that are different shapes. And so he's saying, I want you to go from this shape to this shape to this shape, and it's morphing in between that, and that's why it's looking really nice as you're pulling that string. Yeah, there we go.
here's one I made earlier. No.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay.
But this will
Cool.
this will walk through how that actually
Hmm.
works, that kind of process. So that process is, or for me, I might have this wrong. You might tell me that I'm doing this maybe differently to how you do it. But say I'm doing this in Figma. This is
Okay.
like my original line that I want,
Hmm.
and then this is like where I want to go to. This is like my
Hmm.
bend, and then this is my other bend.
Hmm.
Okay.
And in SVG land, I don't care about these two, but I do want their paths. And then what happens is, and this blows out my face a little because the screen's so white, but when we come back here, all I've got to do is grab those path strings and actually push them into a timeline or
Okay.
something with GSAP. So it actually is as simple as, I know we hate the word simple, but it is really as straightforward as this. So
Okay.
if we just say what's happening at the top here, I'm just pulling in GSAP. I'm using SkyPack because I use it pretty much on most of the demos. But Morph SVG, you actually need membership for that, but you can grab it on CodePen and you can use
For
the
free.
Amazon
Yeah.
the Amazon links for it.
For
All you have to do is register the plugin,
Okay.
And then I'm creating a timeline here, but it doesn't have to be a timeline. In this case, it could just be uh, GSAP.2, and then I could just repeat it infinitely.
Yeah, so
And
GSAP.2 is just what's called a tween. It's going from one state to another. A timeline is when you typically add multiple tweens, for anyone who doesn't know what a tween or a
Okay.
timeline is.
I'm glad you're
all I'm
showing
saying is,
this because it's like when I see something like this, like the finished product, I'm like, man, that's complicated to go from that to that. And then you've just demonstrated that, yes, you do a lot of great work in these, but it's not as complicated some of these things as it might appear to be, which is
yeah,
kind of
honestly,
cool to
it's all
see.
smoke and mirrors. It's all smoke and mirrors. The
I think people think with the like when they see things morphing, they think that you're like physically like taking an animation and saying, I want you to go here, 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 so that you see this like morph. But we use things like this, like GreenSock morph SVG. So what you see there where it says morph SVG and it's got that M, it's starting at the M, that's a path in an SVG. So when you create that line in like an editor, you can just grab that path and then you can
Hmm.
put it there and you're saying, I want to go from that straight line to this other path. And so it will morph in between for you. You're not having to think of all those little in betweens from that straight line to the curve.
Okay.
GreenSock's doing that for you. So you just grab that and put it in. You can also technically have that still in like your pin or wherever you're putting this and just hide it and say you want to morph to that, but it's easier to just grab a path like what Jay's doing
Okay.
and just put in the path instead of
this is
trying to take the
the
DOM element.
like this is the output from Figma, like
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
SVG with 3 lines, and all you've got to do is take the middle one, which is this one, and then you literally just copy the string out
Okay.
because it's the same piece. You're just moving it, and then if you wanted to like, so for example, this pocket watch thing I'll make, the example would be that you just take something and stick it on the end.
Mm-hmm.
And what you would do is you would grab the two things. So I mean, this is very rough, but and I'm trying to use Figma more lately because I
Uh-huh.
normally use Inkscape, but you would just duplicate it and then create a second one, and then you could just like almost line it up perfectly at the top,
Mm-hmm.
however you need to. So that looks
Okay.
pretty good. And then just come in here and then just bend this one. So be like, all right, cool. That's going to be my endpoint. And the reason for this is that you can't like you could do the morph, but you'd actually want to swing something, so you need to like rotate a group. So what you
Mm-hmm.
would actually do here is like this group would actually you'd create like you have to kind of plan ahead when you do the SVG stuff. So you're kind of like thinking, oh, what am I going to do here? So you could actually rotate this group and not show a line for it, so you know exactly where the ball goes. But then you just have a second piece where like the line updates in the morph, and
Okay.
as long as you sync up the ease and the time, it will look as if the ball's swinging on the string, even though it's technically not. It's just rotating a big rectangle. So
Okay. Okay.
it's all smoke and
It's
mirrors, man.
Yeah, it's a lot of tricks. And just like Jay saying, I think a lot of people, when they first mess with SVGs and they go to do their stuff and then they realize, oh, something's wrong. And then they think they just did it wrong. So what Jay's doing here, I typically do too. Like you go in, you plan out all these things, and then you find, oh, I'm probably going to have to plan this some more and do it again. You're going back to your editor pretty often when you're doing like SVG animations to fix the lines a little bit. Technically, GreenSock does have like a plugin where um, you can manipulate some of the lines and stuff they have for other things and you can just grab it there. But a lot of times people messing with SVGs are going to be going to an editor, messing with the stuff, bringing it back in, copying just like you did there, the path, and putting that
Okay.
back in just until you get it right. Because a lot of these things are just kind of like, you don't know how it's going to look until you try it. And then you realize, oh, I need to tweak that a little bit and do it again.
That's where the time hole comes because you try it and it doesn't work, and then you have to
Yeah.
go back and work out why it didn't work. And that's I think to when I started trying SVG and I kind of like did the whole threw myself in the deep end like, oh, I need to learn SVG because I actually want to start creating like assets for stuff. I wanted to create like an avatar and things and like branding for a company, and I was like, I don't know where to start. Right, I'm gonna start, and I was like, I'm going to start doing animation, and then you learn like this. When you throw yourself into something, and there's like not like you can't look up, right, how do I draw or how do I animate this particular
Yeah.
thing unless you start diving in the forums. But then you learn how to like quick tricks. Like if ever you get stuck in your SVG, you just wrap things in a G tag, which is a group, and then you just like manipulate the group. So like that's like your escape hatch because you're like, this isn't working right. Wrap it in a group, trigger this, set that, and it's like it's a great way to get comfortable with SVG because
Okay.
I've picked up loads from just like jumping in the actual SVG code because I was like, I have no idea why this isn't working or how to get this to do this. Like a good example is like I think the power tools that I pick out of SVG would probably be like, well, use G tags a lot, although that's not really a power tool, but clip path is a good one, and then like use.
Okay.
Use is like crazy because that's like if you've not used use, basically you end up you create something and then so if we had, I don't know, depths, and then we just created like this path,
Okay.
and then we gave it an ID of line, and then down here we were like, right, cool, I'm just going to use it. I can't remember it. I think it's href.
I think so too. Yeah.
I always get confused between that and which clip path, because clip path uses URL, I think. But yeah, if we just did that and then drop that in, then it would technically use that. Like it's like components in SVG in a weird sense. So
Okay.
you can create blocks of code and then just be like, I'm going to use that. And this becomes like really handy when you want to do duplication, but you don't want to actually create duplicates. So
Yeah, I don't
it's
use enough. I really should because I do a lot of times just make like duplicates, but exactly that. Instead of having to like say you have a bunch of circles, instead of having to have like in your editor create a bunch of circles, you can use after you've created a circle. So it's like
it became super, and I can't annoyingly like I've used it a bunch of times, but the only animation I can think of that springs to mind is one that I did on. I'm just going to try and find it. I did it on Learn with Jason, which was I did the party corgi
Okay.
with voice animation, with voice activation, but I've got to try and find it because it'll show you like how use kind of works. I can't remember where it is.
Yeah.
I'll
I
find it. I'll find it.
I dropped a few MDN links in the chat for the things you were mentioning, if people want to explore further. But um,
Yeah, and as Jay's like looking for that, just for anyone who's like on here who hasn't like some of the things we're talking about is obviously for like us, we use these things a lot, and so we kind of know these things. If you have questions and you want to ask us stuff that's maybe more basic or something, please feel free to ask anything. Like we're happy. Both Jay and I have taught SVG and CSS animation, so we're happy to kind of touch on some more stuff that you may want to know. There we go. Party corgi.
I'm smiling because I see
Yes.
a corgi now.
So yeah, this was a demo I put together, but it's voice activated, so
Okay.
I can probably take apart the timeline. But the thing to notice, so if you ever want to do like an animation where you repeat something or like make it like a perfect loop,
Okay.
you can just use to duplicate it. So like the stripes on the dog or the corgi move if you say, I don't know if this will work, corgi. It might not work.
Let me check. He's not gonna hear me. Never mind. What am I saying?
Yeah, it might not. It might
Oh,
not
it's
work because is it corgi party. There we go. So it does
okay.
work.
Yeah.
But the yeah, like the way the stripes move is like a continuous block, but I only wrote the block once and then
Okay.
I used to duplicate it. But that's like another thing, right? So it's like I don't think I'm ever going to need to drop this demo on like a client site or something, but I learned techniques
You'd be
from it that I can
surprised.
use elsewhere. Well, yeah,
Depending
yeah,
on
you
the
know.
Yeah. Well, there is
for those
Corgis
for those
Anonymous, so
wondering, like Jay said that initially he said, he hadn't used this stuff, and then he started using it because he wanted to create different things with like SVGs. And when I first started with GreenSock and SVGs, I like could barely do like one little thing, and then from there, from experimenting like Jay does, like I went within 6 months, I had a job as a GreenSock developer. Within like a year, I was doing animations for like Adobe and animations like that, where you're doing crazy animations. So don't say you can't do that because you
Yeah.
can. You can really
That's the-
pick this stuff up pretty quickly once you start. And when you know some of these things, like Jay's showing you all, like the line things, the first time you learn them, they take a lot of time. But then you find out, oh, I'm going to use this similar thing in another demo that I want to do. And you can just take that chunk of code and then just mess with it. Like when I used to do demos, they would take me like a couple days to like figure out and get going. And now when I think of stuff, a lot of times I can do it within like just a few hours of like getting some, from my concept,
Yeah.
even creating the SVGs to like going from, because you're repeating these things like you would do with any other code.
It's crazy to think like all the like things in your tool belt that you pick like you've picked up over time, right? So like you're saying
Yeah.
like morph, I just know that's a thing now. But when you first look
Yeah.
at it, you're like, well, I always think of the docs example because it's like I think it's like a hippo morphing out of a
Yeah,
circle or
morphing into
something.
like a circle and a star, and you're just
Yeah,
like,
and you look at that and you're like, nah, that doesn't
yeah,
make sense. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then you do it and it happens and you're like, bam,
Yeah.
like yeah, I remember that. So it's like the perfect example of um learning by doing, but like something memorable. So I always like that example because it's kind of whimsical in the fact that like it's a hippo.
Yeah.
I'm never going to need a hippo, but now it's a circle. And the cool thing with GreenSock as well with the morph stuff is you don't have to care about how many nodes are on the path, which is like
Okay.
really neat because other libraries they care about how many nodes are on the path. So like you wouldn't be able, like you got to make sure that your um structure is exactly the same. So like in that
Okay.
example we were doing there with the lines, you'd notice like the definition attribute, which is D. The strings were different lengths, and that's because the curved one has like I guess it would have been a cubic curve on it. My SVG definition string writing from hand is poor, but the but the straight line would have just been M like L to the bottom line, like 0, 300 or whatever.
Okay. Okay.
And the M's would have been longer. But it works all that out for you. I have no idea how they do that under the hood, but it's
yeah.
pretty cool.
It's funny you say that because some of the stuff like we were talking earlier about like when you would take when would you do like CSS animations before, like when would you do GreenSock, and it's some of these kinds of things where like when you're working with clients and you don't have to think about those kinds of things because they might have to maintain it later on or different stuff like that. When I worked with Adobe, they didn't want to use any plugins. And so I had to figure out a bunch of stuff without plugins. So we were talking about the physics. I had to do this thing where there's this like bag and it shot out confetti. So exactly what he said, like a confetti cannon. And I was like, sweet physics. And then I was like, I can't use this. And so I had to literally like come up with like the way to like rotate everything, make it come up. And it was actually from playing with the physics plugin so much. And like I've used it for other things that I was like, I think I can figure this out. I can just do this like manually, have to do everything. But yeah, the plugins are so much nicer when
The
you're allowed to
pain
use
of
them.
it, the pain of working that out, like you just take it for granted, right? So you just
Yeah.
take like stuff like you take a lot of so I guess the big one as well, like for the Switch, is the SVG is like on it's got its whole coordinate space of its own, and that's something we haven't even mentioned. But if you're doing like SVG and you just go, oh yeah, I'll use CSS, and you go like spin, I don't know, rotate 360 degrees with CSS, like it could just spin in a completely different transform origin because the origin's completely different. And then when you use GSAP, you're just like, yeah, just set transform origin center, done, spin,
Yeah.
and it just does it. It works out for you. So like there's things like that you really overlook, and you just think, yeah, that's brilliant, that works. But we don't really praise it enough.
The other day, and someone I don't know, but someone I knew was following them, and she had mentioned she had just got started with SVG animations, and she was doing CSS, and her thing was like rotating all crazy, and I was like, yeah, this happens to everyone when they, to all of us use transform origin and try centering it. And she was like, yes, but there are weird little quirks if you see, like with CSS versus GreenSock. Like that was one of the reasons I started using GreenSock really when I was working with clients and stuff, is because it can be a bit unpredictable with CSS where these things are going to go, where they'll rotate and stuff like that, where you don't have to think about it as much with GSAP.
And it's kind of one of those things as well that sometimes it's like not user error as well because it depends on like what tools you use. So Figma's pretty good. Like Figma outputs pretty clean SVG, but like I'm a long time and I'm like a pretty diehard fan for Inkscape. But Inkscape really balks your SVG.
Yeah.
Like if you move stuff around, it like applies inline transforms and stuff, and it's like kind of a nightmare to clean them off. And then if you were just to throw CSS on that, like it'd be terrible. So like
And that was the other thing I was going to tell her. I was like, if it's not this, it may be the way you have things grouped or the way you have like it, you never know exactly that. I used to use Inkscape when I first started. I use Affinity Designer. For anyone wanting to know, these are like the editors we're using when we are creating like our SVGs and stuff, and then we export them. Figma's free. I use Figma a lot too when I'm working with other people because it's free and it's great. Inkscape's free. Affinity Designer is very similar to like Adobe products, but it's only a one-time fee. It's like $50, I think.
I'm so annoyed because I actually wrote a to-do like in my Notion, which was buy Affinity. It's on sale right now, and I never bought it. So and then I couldn't remember. And then what happened was I was like, buy it. And then I was like, what was the name of that thing I wanted to buy? And I couldn't even remember the name of it. So yeah, I just put like.
There you go, Jay. Affinity, they have sales a lot, so keep an eye on it because they do sales a lot.
I definitely want to try that one out because it does look good, and I've just not got around to trying it. And the reason I've been trying to do like more Figma stuff is obviously it's super approachable for people. Like you can just jump in, start dragging it around, it works. But Figma has some interesting quirks. Like when you come from something like Inkscape and you're like, okay, how do I do this with nodes? And it's like, well, you just kind of like
you're not super. It's not as intuitive as like some of the other ones. That's why like I do switch back and forth. A lot of times what I do is I will create something in Affinity Designer and then I will put it over in Figma so that other people can like mess around and use it. And then sometimes I clean up stuff in Figma because I find that a little bit easier. But it's interesting everyone's tools.
No, I tell you what's really good about these conversations is that it actually vindicates my thought process with SVG because everyone else is just like throwing it in there as well. Because it's like when you learn it, no one says like, look, it's okay, just get it working. Like I remember one of the first streams I did, I tried making, I did like a fireflies in a jar thing. And it was one of the first things I did, and I was like, I don't know how this is going. And someone in the chat, I remember just saying like, it's fine, magic numbers, get used to it. Like that's SVG.
Yeah. Yep.
It's so true. It's so true. Like, you have to kind of let go and be okay with things like and weird kind of processes. So like even for so if you want to do something, for instance, I have an interesting workflow I use on the iPad, which would be if I want to do SVG on the iPad, I'll do like Vectornator, and then I'll airdrop that, but I'll probably like airdrop it into like Inkscape or something, and then I'll like tidy it up in Inkscape or Figma, and then I'll bring it into the browser, or I'll run it through SVG OMG. And what we really want is one tool that just does all of it in one.
Yes.
But yeah.
Yeah, we
So
use
how do you
SVG.
feel? Okay. Go ahead.
Use the SVG OMG to clean up our SVGs. That's the one from Jake Archibald, right?
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah, I pretty much always have that open if I'm doing anything with SVGs. That's my last step. Or maybe not last, but one of my last steps is always like putting it in there after I'm done because it will clean it up even better. And
when you reach the final last step, it's like the fist pump when you get to close that tab, right? So
yeah, exactly. Yes, we're good. I don't have to keep going back to my editor, exporting this again, then putting it back in SVG.
I don't know if you have the same. I have a thing where what I do is I create the SVG, and then I'm like, right, this is original, so I use BEM on the naming. I'm like hyphen original, and then I go in SVG OMG, and I save that, and I'm like hyphen optimized. And
yeah, I always have like my one, and then I'll have like cat 2, cat 3, like, because I've had to go through it so many times, but I need that original in case I have to go back and do it. So, y'all, these are pain points with SVGs that you will probably experience if you use SVGs at any point.
I love that though, because like I say, it makes you feel normal to know that other people do the same things.
Well, that's what I
Yeah.
was going to ask you. So when I've taught these things, a lot of times people will say, "Oh, can I use?" They're looking for SVGs because they don't want to create them, which is very valid when you're first starting out with an SVG. You don't want to take the time to create your own SVGs. You're just trying to learn how to animate these things, and so people will grab things off of stuff like escaping my mind right now, the free one. It's good. They have really good SVGs, the free SVGs that you can
Is
get.
it like
Like
vector
from
stock
Lena
or something like
or Lena Lampard.
No, no, no. Yes, yeah. What's it called?
Yeah, yeah.
The
Andra.co.
Undraw. Okay, so Undraw has great SVGs. You can get those, you can animate them, but what you should know is that if you're going to get those and you drop them into something like Figma or Affinity, the tools we're talking about using, these things aren't grouped.
Okay.
The SVGs that you get, so like the different arms and the different stuff there, like you have to go through a process if you're going to animate them. And I usually have to teach this to people because they don't know and they go to animate and then they get those like weird transforms or things happening. So none of this stuff is grouped. And so you do have to go through a step of like putting them into these editors and deciding like what you want to animate. And then just like Jay was showing that G tag, you want to group these things together so that it's easier to animate and probably name them too, because you can name them in
Okay.
your editors and export those as IDs. And none of those are done. So when people go to like animate, they see this like huge wall of like SVG and they don't know where anything is. They're like, what's happening? And I'm like, yes, they're beautiful SVGs, but you have to take the time to do something with them. And I don't know if you've had like that issue, Jay, where when teaching or anything like that.
I tend to, I don't know, maybe it's self-torture, but I tend to just make everything from scratch. So
Yes, well, I do
I'm
too,
yeah, I'm one
but
of those. I just make everything. Like I like to do that. I like to do. I think we were talking. I can't remember what we were saying the other day, and I was saying like, oh, instead of doing a dot files like sync, I just made my own instead. And like that's kind of how I learned. Like, oh, I'll just make the tool myself. I'll do it myself.
yeah,
Like I think
yeah.
today I shared one. Today was like I shared one for Twitter, and it was like, you remember when they changed the layout and everyone like
Oh
threw their
yeah.
arms up in the air like, oh, this is
Yeah.
terrible. So I was like, I don't know how to. I've never done a Chrome extension. I've never published one, so I'll just make one. So I just made one that like stripped all the UI out, and now I
Mhm.
made some changes there. It like hides the metrics and stuff as well, and I
Okay.
didn't make it. I just made it for myself, but I was like, I'll learn how to do it. So
Yeah.
it's another one of them. So the same with SVG. But I was going to say the opposite of what you said, which was sometimes you put an SVG and they've just merged the whole thing into one path, and you're like, oh,
Yeah. That too. Well, that's also on Undraw. So a lot of times, like those kinds of things, I will take them, I will put them into like Figma or Infinity, and I have to retrace whatever's there
Yeah.
because, it's like an arm, a leg, and a shirt randomly all grouped together, and you're like, what's happening? Like, or merged into a whole path. And so, like, if you go to like move that or delete it or something, the whole thing's gone instead of like you thinking, oh, these should be individual, they're not. And so those are things to be aware of if you start messing with SVGs and you want to like get the free ones that are online. Is that a lot of times designers and I've worked with designers a lot with SVG, so that's something that we always had to communicate together when they would send me like SVG files. I'd be like, well, I can't animate this the way you want me to because these things
Okay.
are all in one path. You need to like separate those, please.
it's the
And
same
so
with sometimes you like, I don't know, you grab an icon from somewhere. So like simple icons is a really good example, and you're thinking, like hopefully they've done it so that path is that piece, and then you're like, oh no, it's all merged into one, and then you have
yeah,
to make your own. Like you just
yeah.
duplicate it. It happens, yeah, it happens all the time. But yeah,
Yeah,
that's like the
but if you
flip
want to
side
learn how to make SVGs, it's a great way to like grab things off that are,
of
and
icons
then
though.
learn how to trace them, and that's how you can learn those editor tools.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, it's
sometimes,
another good like approach as well. Like if you because one thing that's kind of hard I think is when people can draw but they don't,
Mhm.
like there's some weird kind of concepts, right? So when you start doing SVG, And I love how this has just turned into an SVG. Like we might be doing animation. We're just talking about SVG. Sorry, man. But
No, it's all good because I'm curious. But before you go on, what's the tool you use on your iPad? Because I have an iPencil or an Apple Pencil,
I
and like
use,
I have Procreate, but that doesn't do SVG. So I'm curious what the tool
and
is you use
that's
on.
exactly what I was about to say about. So I use so there's a tool called Vectornator that will
Okay.
do like SVG. But there's a weird kind of like, so if you can do art and you can draw and you use like Procreate, then
Okay.
you like you're halfway there. But then when you think, oh, I want to make that move, like Procreate does raster, so you're kind of like, what do I do?
Yeah.
And then when you get to using SVG and you're like, oh, it's cool, I'll just go in Vectornator and trace it or whatever, or in Inkscape. But you can trace a raster, but it'll be like ridiculous. It'll create like a billion nodes and paths.
Okay.
So your best bet is to trace it. But then if you don't know like kind of the concepts of SVG, like that could be quite tricky. So like
Yeah.
there's like a mental mindset you kind of approach, and that's why I like Figma, and I think it's
Okay.
great. If you use one of the other tools like Inkscape or like you learn those kind of concepts of like how to make shapes in SVG. So like if you wanted to make an awkward shape, you'd create like say you wanted to merge a square and a circle
Okay.
and like you put them together. Like the trick is to convert them both to paths and then like you start using like path manipulations on them. So like you could do a union
Okay.
or like an extraction to cut out a chunk. And like they're like things you learn from doing SVG in an editor.
Okay.
So like if I was doing something in Procreate, I'd draw it in Procreate and then I'd be like, cool, I just airdrop that into like Inkscape or whatever, and then I'll just reduce the opacity down to like 0.5 and then I'll just
Okay.
trace it with elements
Hmm.
roughly. But
Yep.
yeah, knowing how to make weird shapes and how to do tricks with paths is like probably one of the biggest things with SVG. Once you've got that,
Hmm.
you're kind of there. Um,
Yeah,
but
that's
yeah,
what I actually usually try to teach. If I'm going to teach SVG, that's kind of where I start a lot of times with people because they don't realize all those little things that if you want to like be able to create these things, you can just take images and stuff you see and you can just like draw them and stuff, but then you got to think about how you're going to animate them. And so that's one of those things that I think people, just like Jay said, don't always, you have to kind of figure out yourself a lot of times when you're first getting in. And I don't think people necessarily teach that as much. And so that's one of those things I usually try to teach. I'll drop like a code pin in
Okay.
here. Awesome,
Uh,
Jay. So this code pin that I have in here is one that I did that I animated. It was an image that I found on Dribble, which is what I
okay.
used to do a lot, is that I would go on Dribble, I'd find images and stuff. But it was an image, right? So I had to then take that little panda and put him into Affinity, which was what I was using, and draw and trace everything that I
Okay.
was going to animate. So I traced it all, grab the colors, all that kind of stuff. Exactly what Jay said. I would bring down the opacity, trace over it, pick out the colors, get it all there, and then I had to group it how I was going to animate it. And I feel like a lot of times people don't realize like those are the steps that you kind of have to go through to get a SVG that's animatable, not just like there for you to look at.
Panda's
Uh,
perfect. I like that
yeah.
term. We're big panda fans in this house. Like panda bears, all of it. I mean,
Red pandas are cool too. I don't know if you ever seen a red panda.
yeah,
Yeah.
little pandas.
Yep.
Honestly, this house is full of pandas. There's a story behind it as well. Like I already liked bears, but then when I got my house, like the proceeds of the house go to WWF. And
Okay.
Mhm.
obviously their logo is a panda, so it was like it was meant to
Yeah.
be. So I should just have a
Nice.
panda flag out the front. But yeah, but yeah, like that video just put in the chat as well. Like that was what taught me to get started with SVG. So it's like
Okay.
it's one of those rite of passage, like the donut. So
That's actually what I used too. I don't know if it was that exact one, but I had started with Inkscape, and that's how I learned how to do them. Was that like Inkscape tutorial on YouTube was like what taught me like, oh, this is how I could do it.
it
Sweet.
feels like it feels
I was
crazy now because I think about it and I think like, yeah, that's all right. Like I know what I'm doing now. But if I think back to then, I remember sitting there and thinking, what the hell is this guy going on about? I probably
yeah.
watched that video 4 or 5 times at least to try and understand what he was doing, and then you just keep doing it, and then it'll click. Like you'll just
Yeah.
get it. You'll be like, yeah, I'm unioning this, I'm subtracting that, I'm adding nodes here, and you can just design whatever you want. But yeah, it's one of
Yeah,
the you just got to dive in.
yeah, and I
It
guess
doesn't get
that's
handed
where
out to you.
yeah, that's where the hours come in, like you clearly enjoy what you do as well, so that definitely helps. But yeah, there's no like magic like going from zero to hero. It's you got to put in the time. Um, I was just gonna give a shout out to somebody in the chat, A Galliat. They were saying on CodePen, you can actually use the GSAP bonus plugins for free on CodePen. Apparently, I don't.
Yeah. There's a
So
there's a page as well. I don't know if is it Angela? Did she link to the pen?
oh,
And
I
it
guess
just
that's
gives you a link to
Angela.
all of them.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I'll
Oh
post it
yeah, that's the
again.
pen. That pen is yeah, brilliant. It's just a link to buttons for all the URLs. It's
Okay.
Yep.
perfect.
Anytime I want to try something with GreenSock, that is my go-to. I just grab those and I do it on CodePen because you can do it for free on there. They're gracious enough to put that on there so that you can try out pretty much anything that they have that usually costs money. So they have like plugins that are premium plugins that you can
Okay.
get if you want to actually use them like on websites and stuff that are that that you're going to use them on. That's why Adobe didn't want to at that point, and I couldn't use them.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I was gonna ask you why they didn't want it. Was a cost thing or?
Yeah, I don't know the cost isn't that much for them, but they
That's
just didn't want to.
that is something that you have to kind of factor in as well. Like if
Yeah.
people want animation stuff, are they willing, like if they need something that has to work a particular way, are they like, are you gonna like how do you drop that bombshell?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I can do that for you, but it's gonna cost you like a business license. How do you feel about
Hmm.
that? And then you have to factor in if it's really. I'm surprised with Adobe though. I'd have thought that had just been like, oh,
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
that's my
I
lunch
think
money. Here
everybody
you go.
knows who Adobe is, so
I think they were okay with getting it if we really needed it. I think they wanted to see if we could do it without, so it wasn't something that they had to upkeep because this was like a separate thing. It was like it was Adobe, but this was like a separate thing they were working with someone else on, and they didn't want to have to like think of the keeping up the license and stuff like that. And so they if I really needed them to, they would have got them. But it actually was kind of nice because it made me have to think outside the box of the plugins that I normally relied on, and I had to be like, I make this work without a plugin.
That's what's like, yeah, I gotta say back to because then you have to try and think, well, is there another option that does this or,
Hmm.
and that's what's like I always get drawn back to GSAP anyway, even if I try something else, because I'm like, no, I'm just so used to having all the magic there
Yeah.
for me, and it's like it's kind of weird. So I touched Anime.js the other day for like the
okay.
first time, and I was like,
Mhm.
yeah, timeline, that's like a concept I'm familiar with. Like they do similar, but it just didn't feel quite the same. It didn't work quite the same. Like I just
Okay.
threw a transform origin and I was like, I don't know if that's how GSAP would do this.
So
And you just
so
kind of question it and I'm like, go back to GSAP. Oh, I'm back home now.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. Like we were talking about when it comes to not necessarily basic animations, but when you realize the limits of doing it all in pure CSS animations, is GSAP pretty much like the industry standard in terms of these things at this point? Or like I know there's other products like you were saying, but it seems to be
Yeah.
like the go-to tool. Like I've heard Sarah Drasner talk about it before to you, and
Hmm.
okay,
I
Yeah, I
think
mean, go ahead, Jay.
yeah, I mean, I think it's the go-to, and because you can do so much of it. Like
hmm
there isn't anything you can like. I mean, you can pretty much animate anything with it, and the bonus of it is that I mean, they even go further than that. You can do more with it. You can drag things, you can scroll things, you can do all these other things that they're kind of like extra bonuses that it's kind of crazy like that they're offered. Like that's part of it.
okay,
But yeah, I was gonna say I think the interesting part is when you so I actually hopping in the forum earlier today talking about this, and it's when you get everyone that's more from like React land
Hmm.
or
yeah,
like using frameworks, and it's really not that tricky to use GSAP with React. You have to use like
It
ref.
was. I will say it was. I think the newer GSAP syntax has made it easier in the way you import things. But I remember when I had to work on a project, we were doing Vue at the time, but like I was in the forum a lot asking them the questions because I was like, this is not working how everyone expects this to work. And it's so much easier now.
I think since like hooks has been about,
Yeah, I think Hoax has helped too. I
like
would
since
agree.
hooks
Yeah.
and use effect have been in React, then like GSAP's pretty fine to use because you just use a ref to get your DOM
Hmm.
element and you just chuck it in like you would in an effect, and then you just update your state around your animation. So like if you're triggering something, then you would update state on the complete, or however you need it to fit into your life cycle. But the interesting thing is, because not everyone is comfortable, like just because we're comfortable or like I'm comfortable with using ref, like not
Yeah.
everyone uses ref, and like, that's something you have to
Hmm.
really consider, I think. And people like components, they just want to go,
Yeah.
oh, this is my component,
Yeah.
and drop it in. And I think that's where Framer Motion, obviously they
Hmm.
have like that kind of hook in there that people go, I need animation in my React. They just throw Framer in because they're like, oh cool, motion div opacity, what, like, and it just does it like
Okay.
out the box. But I don't feel like there's a reason that we couldn't do that with GSAP. Like I messed around with some ideas the other day, and
Hmm.
for me it's like the standard. I'll always reach for it unless a project's already using Framer or something. But it seems
Okay.
Hmm.
like in my scope, I always see it as it's either GSAP or Framer, and the only other times I really use it because someone's using it in React because it's a component-based thing.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
not tricky to use in React. It just takes a little bit
Yeah.
of managing your refs, right? So,
Yeah. And just
And
to we'll just clarify to some folks who might not be familiar with React, you might use another framework. So refs are a way to get an actual reference to a DOM element, not a React component, for example. And
yeah,
so that's what Jay was referring to. Think of it like a document.get element by ID or something, or a document.query selector to
I was
some
gonna
degree.
say I'll tell you what the equivalents are in like Vue, etc. But I wouldn't want to get that wrong because I have very limited experience with
well, I
Vue.
was just about to tell you what it was too, but it's been a little while since I did it. We used Vue when we did the Adobe, and you do have to have. I don't think it's called Ref, but it's something similar that you do
Similar,
have
isn't it?
to.
Yeah.
You do have to, grab them and attach them to that to be able to mess with the DOM as well. Otherwise, you end up with. Technically, you can grab like a DOM element, like you could put the
Yeah.
ID or the class, but you end up with weird quirks and things not working as you expect, and so you need to like reference them. And so there is a way to do that in Vue too. I can't find it now. I can drop the link if I
I've
find it
done
in a little
like
bit.
I've done Vue demos with GSAP of like
Hmm.
random things to try Vue out and mess around with Vue, but it's just not something I've done a lot of commercial stuff with. Like I'm always in
Yeah.
React world, so I'm like, yeah, cool, component, component, component.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I think
yeah,
the
Yeah.
biggest thing is just to realize that with GreenSock, you typically are grabbing a DOM element, and so depending on your framework, that might not work as expected. The framework, and I think that's what gets people like, "What? I can't use this with this," and
Yeah.
just
you touch
knowing
on a
what you
good
have to
point.
attach it to.
Like you touched on a pretty good point there with like class names and stuff. And
Hmm.
typically when you're in a framework, especially if you're like with components, like you kind of want to avoid using string selectors and things because then you could end up in like a world of pain where you've got like a component that's used 10 times with the same class, but you only want
Yeah.
one of them to animate, so you use the class and it animates all of them or something like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
like you
Yeah.
need refs for that.
Yeah, 100% agree with that too, because I've seen where instead of using REST, folks will use a query selector or even do like a document.get element by ID, and that's totally fine. But if you have the same ID, it's gonna mess things up, and that's kind of like the beauty of the ref. It also means you just don't have to add extra attributes because it just gets the actual reference to the
Yeah.
element. So yeah, and and this kind of
No, it's
ties into
kind of
what
yeah.
I was gonna say. It kind of ties into what you're saying. So like refs are kind of like an escape hatch to get back into the imperative world of like the DOM. So is in your experience like any kind of thing, like whether it's GSAP or other libraries, do you always have to go to that escape hatch with imperative to do things, or
Well, I was gonna say because this actually it's kind of it's funny. I'm just bringing up stuff I've said in forums earlier today, but yeah, that was kind of like my example was so a good example is React Free Fiber.
okay.
So they have like components for like meshes and stuff, and you can
Hmm.
just create. So like there is an example of like a convenience package almost that says, hey, you don't need to use ref, like here's some hooks and stuff, and you can just like make stuff for free without having to. But I'd have to check my code because I've not done loads.
Okay.
And like
Mhm.
it's one of them, like you could just use Free.js like normal and just use refs if you wanted to, but there is that convenience if you need it.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, there's always different ways. I always think it depends. It really depends. I think with animation though, I think I've always just grabbed the ref for
Mhm.
GSAP stuff, just because it kind of makes. Supposedly there is a React GSAP, but I've never checked it out.
I think I've seen that too. I haven't either. So, uh, but also, Nick, to answer your question of like whether it's the standard, what I normally point people to, if you've ever been on awards.com, it's like the sites that always win like things. If you look at any of those that have animations, they are probably using GreenSock. Almost
Okay.
everyone that wins that has some kind of animation is using GreenSock. And so that's
Okay.
usually when people like push back or say anything, I'm just like, you can go look there and you can see all the different things that
Christina markets
GreenSock
it
can
like,
do.
Christina's like, I can get your site on awards if you
Yeah,
want to be
yeah.
on there.
I'm in. I'm in. But no, that's cool.
But yeah,
No.
yeah, like I think especially with awards, whatever. Lots of like WebGL GreenSock stuff, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
That's a really like fancy, and
We
that's like
haven't
a good
done yet,
example.
but yeah.
Okay, so you can even tie into something like WebGL. I didn't realize.
Oh yeah.
What about
I think the
Canvas? Is it
coolest one
supported as well, or?
recently, yes, Canvas. Yeah, you can do
Okay.
Canvas with GreenSock. Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was an example I did the other day. So like, there's a really cool. So that we could talk about GreenSock all day, really. There's some
Yeah, I
really
know.
cool features. So there was one I did a demo of the other day just to show people what you can do with it, and it was just a ball on a canvas, and you can just use the GSAP ticker, which is like it's like a convenience for request animation frame. But the cool thing with that is that you could like animate a value for like a position and then just use the ticker to like update the position
Okay.
like inside there. But like then you could just set the FPS with like a one-liner, like a function. So you could just say like, oh cool, ticker.fps 24 because like 24 FPS is supposedly the holy grail of cinematic like FPSs, right? So you
Yeah.
could set technically you could just set all your animations to 24 FPS with like one line. So like
Okay.
it gives
Okay.
you that convenience of like a way to hook into the actual engine that does it all. And then that's really convenient for doing canvas stuff because if you've ever tried to write like request animation frame loops where you skip frames, like it just becomes like a maintenance and it's not ideal.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like that's yeah, super cool. I haven't used it much, but I really want to try using it some more because just flicking FPS like up and down is oddly satisfying.
I guess it's a way to kind of
I
like
worked on a
speed up things
project
too, or?
once. Oh, yeah, I worked on a project once where we were using GreenSock and we were creating a game online. And initially we were using just like DOM elements and stuff. And then at some point, the manager I was working with was just like, "Hey, maybe we could do this whole game in Canvas." And I was, okay. And I hadn't used Canvas yet, and so then I had to switch and like do GreenSock with Canvas. And then at some point, again, we switched back to what we were doing. But it was like one of those things where like I didn't know either initially that like you could use Canvas, and I had to figure that out too. And I think that was the first time I went on the GreenSock forum because I was like, "Help, can you help me? If you all need help, go to the GreenSock forum. They're
Like
great."
that's the joy of that is the joy of what I was saying earlier. Like it animates anything. Like it animate a
Mhm.
value. It'll animate. I mean, it'll probably animate the date. I mean, you could animate anything with it.
Mhm.
It's not just visual. Like even though
Okay.
the output might be visual. So um, my first like well, I'll go back. My first recollection of Canvas is like I decided to learn it from like scratch. Do it before I left in the morning. So at breakfast, I'd be like, I'm gonna smash out some Canvas, and I learned all like the performance hooks and like how you should do things, render off the canvas and all that kind of stuff. And then you're like, yeah, it's cool. And then like later on, you find out, oh, like GreenSock, this is gonna make things so much easier because like say just silly things like a lot of people would make like another rite of passage is probably when people make like particles just flying around on a canvas or like they just go right I want 500
Okay.
circles that move around randomly. But
Mhm.
it's really hard to like start calculating your own easings and like doing all that kind of stuff. But if you just say, I'm going to tween all the particles from X to Y, from, X0 to X100, and I'll just use whatever ease I want, then it's going to take care of all of that for you. Like, you don't have to think about it. You just do it. And
By the way, everyone, x-axis is like this, the y-axis is like this
Yeah.
on the web when you're animating things. So when he's talking about x to y, that's what he's talking.
Yeah, sorry, I skip all that.
It's okay.
Yeah. Sorry, people. It's what it's like on my stream as well, but people have to stop me and say, "What are
it's
you
all
doing?"
good.
Different with Canvas. So when you're animating on the web, the y-axis, which is like this, if you do a negative number, it goes up.
Okay.
Isn't that opposite on
Yeah.
Canvas? Is it opposite on Canvas? I can't remember. There was like a weird quirk like that. So what a lot of people don't realize, when you animate and you go and you want a negative number for y, you have to you go up. People think you go down. So that's like one of those things that people don't realize when they're first animating. But
Yeah.
I feel like I remember that like being the opposite with Canvas, but maybe I'm wrong. It's been a long time since I worked.
I have a. Let me grab it.
Yep.
Another Blue Peter moment. Here's one of him. Here's one I made earlier. Grab this one. So I can actually just show you
Okay.
what I was talking about. Move you over here. Share screen.
It's a good build up. All right.
Just for a green circle. No, so this is an example. So this is canvas.
Okay.
And I'll pump that up a bit. So yeah, that's just a canvas, and then this is just a here I'm clearing it on each frame.
Okay.
Drawing, so you use arc to draw a ball, and I'm just saying, right, on each frame, draw the ball, and all we're saying is go from 2y25, and I believe it starts at sort of like, there you go, it starts at y 275,
Okay.
be down here, and just go to y25, which goes
Okay,
up.
so it's not the opposite. It's the
No,
same.
it should be, it's still the same. We'll work that out now. This is why I thought we'd come on here, because I could just clarify. But yeah, like, it just goes up with this one call, but we're not
Okay.
actually animating something physical. We're animating that value on this object. So it's just an
Okay.
object,
Yeah.
and we're
I see
just
what you mean.
saying update ball y, but this just says, cool, I'm just going to take that value and I'm just going to do whatever you want with it. So like we could change this to none, and it should look a bit different. I think it looks, oh no, I need to run it. And then it should be like really, yeah, like now it's just really
More
not
linear, just
not that fun.
Yeah.
But then if I did like a bounce, but it kind of abstracts you away from having to think about all these kind of things. So now it's doing like a little ricochet at the top.
Okay.
But then the cool thing is that one liner I was on about is this piece here. So there's this concept of the ticker. And that's like your underlying request animation frame, if you want to think of it like that. So here we're just doing FPS 60, but I could take it all the way down and do 5 frames a second. Or then I could be like the magic 24, and now it's ready for the big time.
Yeah, it's movie star right there.
But yeah, like it's just like convenience things like that. So that's why when you use something with Canvas, it's really good. But then like the WebGL stuff, the FreeJS stuff, because FreeJS is kind of like the 3D canvas almost, I guess. So you can hook things into that. So you could use it for, I think I did. See if it comes up. There we go. So yeah, this is like FreeJS, and this is it gonna load? Yeah. So this is like Conway's Game of Life.
Yeah.
And these are just all cubes, but I'll just use GSAP to play it, and all it does is just scaling all the cubes. But there's no
Nice.
Probably looks terrible on
Yeah, I
stream.
was gonna
It's
say for
chugging
folks on
on
the
the
stream,
computer.
it might be a little jagged when you see it on the stream, but you can
But
definitely
it does look cool. Trust us.
yeah. Well, this brings up something I was thinking when we were talking about using the refs in React, for example. I'm guessing you also kind of want to go the ref route as well because you don't necessarily want to have to wait on the component lifecycle for things to happen. It could cause, I imagine, some kind of delays in your animation if not.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of an interesting point as well because like every animation is different. Like it depends what you're making. So like if you're making, I don't know, like a transition from something, or like you want to turn something on and off. So if I think of while I've got the screen up, and I can only think of this because I was writing about it, and it was just an instance of um React and something. So if I think of this, so I use GSAP here, but
Okay.
and I just create something random. There we go. And when I save it or when I download it, so at this point here, I
Yeah.
will trigger like a GSAP animation, and then when the
Okay.
state is ready to change, then I'll tweak it back off. So I'll be like, yep,
Okay.
cool. And then this comes on, and then it goes back off. It won't work because validation, but they
Okay. Okay.
actually looked like, if I can find it, my, come on, there we go. So I'll try and find the code for that in here. But there should be like a shared thing where I've split that out. There we go. I've split that out into its own component,
Okay.
and I'll have like different refs for things. So Vincent is the little guy, but here
Okay.
I'm kind of doing something naughty here. So I'm actually using classes because I know he's the only one on the page. So
Yeah.
Okay.
you didn't see this,
That's okay. It's
but
all about trade-offs, folks.
I've done that too. I've done that too. It's okay.
but yeah. So the use effect here, I'm just saying like if it's current, then I have to remember what I'm actually doing here. So it'll be I'm just setting off like three timeline functions, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're just different timelines that I create when I need them. And I guess here I'm just saying, right, fire it off, show me like this component, and when I do a teardown, I'll just wipe them all out.
Okay.
So yeah, it's the thing is like the change there isn't really much of a change. Like you still write the same code, you just hook it up to the relevant pieces. So I mean here I've just got
Right.
refs tied into these SVGs, but I mean you can see exactly what we were saying earlier. Like I made this one in Inkscape clearly because there's like translates, all these
Okay.
magic numbers that I have no idea what they mean, but if I see them on the page, like I know
Yeah.
roughly what they're tied to. So yeah, I'm trying to think of other GreenSock examples
I'm
with
trying
React.
to
Okay.
find what we did in Vue. Oh, nope, that's not Vue. I
I'll
know
just
the
give
syntax is pretty much the same in Vue. But I can't remember if it's like a ref or what.
I don't remember it. I've been looking at FreeJS, so I'm probably thinking of like, because you do in FreeJS, you do like render a DOM element and you can start doing weird things. And yeah, that's another whole. But this one was like the first kind of React thing I did, I think,
Okay.
with SVG, and it kind of goes on a different.
Mhm.
It's more of like just handling refs, creating timelines, but all that code would just be not the easiest for people to go through.
Sorry,
It's
the bear's cracking me up. That's super
He's
cute.
I love this one. He gets like angrier and angrier. Like, stop it.
when he starts, I can put beeps in. That's what I need to put in.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh man. Uh, I was gonna say, Christina, we're at about 2:25. I'm totally
Mhm.
game to keep talking. Like I could go for another half hour if you want. It's up to you both if you want to keep talking or not. Um,
Yeah,
Because
I'm
I'm
good.
sure you have
I'll
tons of
let Craig.
stuff to keep talking about. I'm happy to stay on. We still got a good crowd in
I
the
did.
stream.
I did want to say something before we go on, because we keep showing. I know we've gone. I think we're probably at a little bit more advanced level of what we've been talking about the whole time, and so I just kind of want to bring back a little bit if we're going to keep going on, and just kind of mention to people in here if they're not used to like GreenSock. So when Jay was showing some of those things, he had timelines, which we mentioned before. So a tween is just from one state to the next. A timeline is when you're kind of doing a lot of tweens in one thing. And then he mentioned reusable timelines. And so a lot of times, one of the advantages, again, of using this versus like CSS is that you can create something like a timeline where you have
Okay.
several things happening. And because you're using JavaScript, I mean, there's like CSS variables and things you can do with CSS, but because you're using JavaScript, you can make them reusable timelines. So you can just put in like I'm trying to find one of mine. So that's what that's how I typically do mine. I don't know what Jay does for his, but when I'm creating like an animation, I will create a function, and I will create a reusable function if I can for some of the things that I'm going through. So if there's something like where a bunch of different things are gonna like maybe disappear and do something, and a lot of my stuff's going to do that, then I will create a function that I can reuse throughout. And you, with GreenSock, you have this thing called a master timeline that you can have. So you create
Okay.
several little timelines, and then you can put them on a master timeline, and that master timeline will run the whole animation. And that whole animation, you can also then go ahead and tweak if you need to. So you can tweak the timing and stuff like that. So again, with CSS, if you were going to have something big like that and you had to go through, you would have to change like all your percentages if you needed to like slow it down, different things. There's other ways around it, which I know Jay has probably used with like CSS variables and stuff.
Okay.
But with GSAP, you can just say like the timeline. They have like a way that you can take that and just say like, okay, I want that whole timeline to be like 2 seconds longer, or nope, I'm going to change it down to 1 second instead. And the whole
Yeah.
timeline will change for you so that you don't have to worry about changing all those percentages.
Or you can go meta and animate the timeline.
Yes, this is true.
And
When
then
you
you
want
could
to
do
do
an
something, when you want to do
animation of
something real cool,
animating the timeline.
that's the real power right there. That's when you go upper level. Like that's honestly that kind of stuff blown my mind recently doing the animate. But yeah, exactly what you're saying. The timeline is and I do exactly what you were saying, Christina. If I've got something like more complex, I have
Yeah.
like main timeline or something I'll call it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I will like that's a composition of things that I'm gonna add to. And I might have functions that create extra things, and I might have stuff that I pull in. But the joy of GreenSock doing it in JavaScript is that you have a lot of flexibility. So you can do things that are really tricky in CSS sometimes. So for example, if you did like a GSAP.2 in a timeline, so let's say we did say we had a timeline and we took a circle and then
Yeah.
we went, right, the circle's going to grow to scale 2, and then I'm going to circle's a really bad one. Let's do square. Square
Yeah.
goes to scale 2, and then I
Uh-huh.
rotate the square by like 45 degrees, so it's like a diamond or whatever. But before I change the rotation, I want to change the color to like green, and
Okay.
initially it's blue. Now in CSS you can do that, like it is all right, but like quick changes, like steps can get really, really annoying.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
there's like different ways there's like hacks. You can do things like the 49.999% kind of things, or you can do like a step timing function, and you could do like 2 animations. And but with GSAP you just do something like GSAP.2 scale 2, and then you do what they have known as dot set, which is another thing,
Okay.
and you can just
Mm-hmm.
set any value, and you just do a set at that exact point to what you wanted, and then move on to your next bit. Like it's much more maintainable, I think,
Okay.
for other people to jump in on. Especially when you do other things as well. That there's a whole another cool like like one power feature, I guess, is like function-based values and position parameters, but we've not even really mentioned them, and they're so overlooked. Like they're really easy to integrate, but
Okay.
the power of them is crazy. So the position parameter is if you have a timeline, you add something to your timeline, and then at the end, like you can. So if you imagine, we did GSAP.timeline. Do you know what? Yeah, this is going to be easier for me to
Yeah,
just
let's bring
type
up
it
the
out.
code.
Let's just type it out. It's just easier.
All right, we're in the matrix. We're in the matrix.
Right, where's CodePen? Let's get CodePen. Uh, get rid of that.
Shout out to CodePen, by the way.
CodePen and
Yeah,
GreenSock just need to be paying Jay and I.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
CodePen,
And I know
and just a
them GreenSock,
CodePen
so just
ambassador.
send me a license. I want to mess around with this stuff.
So if I just, yeah, I'll just like make, I don't know, throw something together. Come on, typing hands. Right, there we go. And I'll just change the body, and we'll just do, this is like a crash course now.
Yeah.
And I'm using stylus here, so people will be like, "Where's all the grammar?"
Yeah.
Just because
I was
I'm
gonna
not
say same thing
doing.
for Pug. That's just a HTML templating language. I'm
Yeah,
assuming that
sorry,
outputs a box class on a div. I'm assuming.
that's
Yep.
the one. And
Yep.
then this one always like sometimes throws people as well. So I use HSL for everything, so I can just pluck colors out of my head, and that one normally throws people off.
Okay.
So I know that's going to roughly be a light green. Um, but if you don't use HSL, I highly recommend it. So I know
Is
this
the
will be like a light black. There we go. Cool. And we'll bring GSAP in. So we'll use SkyPack, CDN, SkyPack.dev, GSAP. So cool. Right. Let's make a timeline. So we have this timeline, and I'm gonna say .2, and we'll do the thing we said. We'll just do the thing we said. So we'll go box scale 2,
okay.
and I'll just say, I don't know, duration 1.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty standard. I'll do like a repeat -1, which in GSAP makes it just go infinitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that will just keep going up. And then we said, what did we say? We said we'd do 2 box and we'd rotate it 45. So it should rotate when it gets to the top.
Okay.
There we go. So it just rotates. I always get I always lose track of which one to use though, because you can use rotation as well, can't you?
Yes, you can.
And
And that is one of those things that's a little bit like, "Ugh," and I always forget
it's like a
about
gotcha
them.
because
Yeah.
it threw me off the other day. Like I really couldn't work out how to make these squares go around a point. And
Mhm.
it was like I changed rotate to rotation, and then all of a sudden it worked. So I was like,
Yeah.
brilliant. So yeah, the
So
example that we were saying here is if that went up and then changed,
okay.
like that's quite tricky to do with CSS. Like if I was doing this with CSS, I'd have to do one animation potentially to scale it, and then I'd do a delay on a second one that would rotate it, and it'd
Okay.
have to use like animation fill mode forwards. But the cool part here is that I could just here do a set, and we could do background color, and at that point I just changed to red,
Okay.
so it goes red and changes. Like it's super easy to do that.
Yeah.
Just a
This
one
seems
liner, and
super
I don't have to worry
intuitive.
about
Mhm.
calculating any percentages or worrying about variables to try and work that out. But then the cool thing is like when you start playing with position parameters, so you think every addition to your timeline is like its own little function. So you can use a .to, or there's also a .from. There's
Okay.
also a from to, but these are all like
Yeah.
maybe out of scope here. But you can even use a .add, and then you could like nest a timeline inside the timeline, and that's kind of like related to what Christina was mentioning earlier when you compose things, and you can create like separate blocks of whatever you're doing and then add them in. So that's how you can
Okay.
compose something more. complex. Like it kind of helps you because you can say, man, I don't know how I'm going to do that part, so I'll break it down first, and then I'll just Lego block them all together at the end.
Okay.
Mhm.
But then the position parameter, so when you add everything on, technically you get like there's two arguments you could put in here.
Okay.
So you could say, we know this one is a duration of 1. So like behind the scenes, what's actually happening here is like there's an invisible position parameter, let's say of 1. But if
Okay.
I was to change that to 2, then there would actually be like a gap, and then it would spin at 2 seconds.
Mhm.
Okay.
So that's kind of cool, I guess, because you can put times in. But when it gets really cool is when you say, look, I don't really care about times, and I've not got the time to work out the math. When you start doing like these kind of things, so that'll say, hey, do it half a second from the end of the last tween. So it doesn't really care. So like I could say, do you know what? That's going to be 10 seconds, and it will start doing it at 9.5 seconds. But
Okay.
like I don't have to care about it. I'm just telling it do it. So like they're like superpowers you start adding on. And position parameter was something I didn't really know about to start with, but when I did learn about it, I was like, man, that's cool.
Yeah.
'Cause I,
Do you use a lot of the positioning like this, or do you use labels too? So there are two different things. I do a lot of this within my own like timelines if I'm doing those, and a lot of times I'll do that. But sometimes I'll do labels as well. So a label is similar. You would put it in just where Jay was putting the timing there, but
Okay.
you would say like if so a label could be start. And if you wanted a bunch of different things that were animating to happen at the start, you would just put start there instead, and then everything would happen at the start. Or you could say start, and then say like start and then plus or minus 2 seconds if you wanted it to, or plus equals. I can't remember the syntax right now. So that it
Okay.
happens 2 seconds after. I don't know exactly what you use there, Jay. If
yeah,
you just
chevron
mostly
is
use that.
like the chevrons are like magic strings. So
Okay.
they're like they tell you to be like, so if I did that, it would actually say like do it at the start. So you
Okay.
see like the box span like straight away. But then
Mhm.
the other one is that's like at the end. So that will say like, oh, at the end do it. Which
Okay.
wouldn't be that useful. It would just be like doing it as per normal. Um, but yeah, I don't use the labels that much actually. I probably should, but they do come in really handy for some things. So one of the demos I'm working on at the moment, I have like where I'm doing this meta timeline animation thing. It's kind of handy to be able to jump to points in time. So I can be
Okay.
like,
Mhm.
oh, timescale to like the go like to this particular label, and you can just
Mhm.
jump to that label, which is really, really useful if you've got like a particular index and you're like, I'm gonna go here. I can't remember. There was the other thing I was gonna say is there's all like the utilities as well. I haven't even like touched on that.
Mhm.
Like that's
Those are my
another
favorite
great thing.
now. I
Like
didn't used to use them as much, and I can't even remember if they were a thing before GSAP 3, but after GSAP 3, I just use the utilities a lot.
Okay.
there's cool things you can do. So you could do
Yeah.
like so trying to think, 'cause we only have one box, but if I was to like bring in a second box,
Okay.
and then we could say, do you know what? Actually, this is going to be a function-based value, and we're just going to do math.random, and I'll do the next bit in a second, but we'll say math.random like times 3,
Okay.
and you see how like they'll both transition now to individual sizes. So it takes like you can take a function and here you get access to the index, so whichever
Okay.
one it is in the array, but you also get access to like the actual element itself, which is pretty cool. Um, but then yeah, you can do stuff like that, but then they also have, I don't know, well, you could do it
You
like
have the
this.
random utils. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have like GSAP random utils, which gives you like you can pass in a range, which is kind of like
Okay.
if you did your own math.floor, math.random times whatever plus the min. But then you've also got the magic string version, which is like interesting too, but loses the function-based value. So you can literally just put in random and be
Okay.
Mhm.
like, cool, 1 to 5, and it will still work the same, but
You
it
know,
will
I
just
didn't
be
even
better.
know about the string version one until like I was watching Learn with Jason, and I think Cassie did it, and I was like, "What?" I knew
Yeah,
the utilities random.
it's really bizarre, like doing it in the string. I do it in the string, but I prefer not to. Like I personally, when I write this kind of stuff, I actually prefer to do like I'll destructure everything at the top. So I'll
Yeah.
be
Mhm.
like timeline to utils random, and then I'll just use them like that. Um, that tends to be how I go about it. But yeah, you can do stuff in strings, which is kind of funky. The reason I don't like doing it in the strings too much is like it's kind of hard to find when you've done it. Sometimes, and I just find it nicer to debug, or if I break something, like there's an
Yeah.
actual hard variable there somewhere that I can locate, not just like in
Mhm.
a string. Because the only thing is like you start doing things like this, right? And then you'll be like, right, now I'm gonna do template literals, and then I'm gonna start doing like bounds and stuff like that, and then it just becomes like a mess. So,
Yeah. You might as well just
Yeah.
use a real function. Yeah.
yeah. And then you've got like, because the other thing is you can do like really cool things where you could do like a pipe, and then you could set up a random function and then create a pipe where you just call a function. It will just call between two bounds you've defined already, and it saves you from having to do it yourself. Like there's loads
Mhm.
of little cool little utilities that are available as well.
Yeah.
Okay. This brings up a
Yeah, they're
question
just
I
like
have. Because you were talking about plugins before. What's the difference between plugins and utilities? I know it's not just naming it. There's clearly a difference, I'm
no,
assuming.
no.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, all the utilities you get, pretty sure you get all of them for free, right? I'm
Yes, yeah.
pretty sure they're all free.
Yeah.
Um,
It's just taking some of the like the methods they already have like in GreenSock and exposing them to you to be able to use and you
Oh, okay, okay.
so yeah, they're called utility methods and there's several of them and they're just there exposed for you. Like they have them all in the descriptions and you can go through and try a couple of them or whatever you want there. Whereas the GreenSock plugin, so like if you brought in GreenSock with like Node, um, you can use GreenSock that way, but it does not have all the plugins that they have. Those you have to bring in each separately
Okay.
in every project you have, and you get those as like a file if you purchase them from GreenSock, or you can do like on CodePen and use them if you want to try them. But yeah.
yeah,
Okay,
there's
okay.
some. I think the ones I mainly use. So like they have like they have some really cool ones. So you have like clamp and distribute is really cool. So you could do stuff like if you had a grid of things and you want to animate from the center of the grid outwards, like it
Okay.
will calculate that for you, so you don't have to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Map range is one that I use like a lot. That's really good for doing like cursor tracking stuff because you can
Mm-hmm.
just say map the range from the window's width to like a bounds on your mouse, which is
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
so if you did uh, here's one I wrote earlier for dev. But yeah, like you can do this kind of thing. So you would do, and I don't know if I used GSAP for this one actually. I think I just showed how to do it without, but you would do like cursor tracking, and here with GSAP you would be like, right, the bounds is, I don't know, 10, and we're going to use that as an X%, and then I'd
Okay.
just say map range 0, window inner width, bounds, and then just set it like with a set, because you can just use like utilities like that as conveniences. Like sometimes the utils in this are that powerful that I just, especially for like little demos, I'll just pull it in instead of like writing my own because it just makes sense to just use them. I'm trying to think of a grid example. Probably, I guess that's not going to bring anything up, but Mushroom Party Code Pen. I didn't think that would come up. That's another one. See if I can find it. I got an example that I did recently. I was like, I can work it out, and then it just made sense to use grid distribution.
Okay.
Let's have a look. I will find it.
This is the problem with having too many demos.
You never have too many demos.
I liked your cross
I
your
would
chicken
like
there.
folders. That's my request.
Have collections. You know, you can
No,
put these
I
things in
don't use it anymore.
collections.
I tell you what I actually do. I have everything on GitHub.
Yeah, there it is. Shroom Party. There you go.
Yeah, so like these are all animating out from the center, and then
Okay.
they like squidge and go down. So but it's just a grid, and then I just say
So when do you use that versus using staggers, where you can stagger the same way, where you start like at a center?
well, here I'm doing, so I think if my machine wakes up, I think it's struggling to push to Discord. Normally I use the streaming machine, not this one.
Oh, okay.
There we go.
All
It's
right,
struggling.
nice.
Come on. You pull through. There, reload. I'm pretty sure I'm applying this. I think I'm applying a delay here. Like you say,
Okay.
and I'm just using a distribute.
Mm-hmm.
No, it doesn't like it.
So for me, Jay, on something like that, there's a property in GreenSock that you can use called stagger, and their staggers are really like advanced now. Like they used to have them in a different way, but you can take like something, say if you have like a bunch of refs or classes that are the same, and you can just put it in and you say you want to stagger those things, and each thing will go at different times, so you're not having to do that individually. And so for me, when I was looking at that animation, my first thought would have been like, I'll use a stagger, but I haven't used the distribute util as much. So I was just wondering kind of where do you think of like how do you decide between like those when you're doing them?
I think it probably came down to one of those times where I was like, I've seen people do this kind of thing. How do I do it?
Okay.
And
Yeah.
like, I'm going to use distribute because there is like a property called when you do the distribute, you can just give it the string grid, and
Mhm.
it just like auto magically works it out for you, right? So you
And
just you can
distribute comes like because you can also do grid and
stagger, right?
stagger. Yeah. I'm wondering if they have like the similar thing there for that.
Let's have a look. Let me open it up. I mean, I'm pretty sure it does because it has like center and end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
you
you
can do
can
it.
pick the specific like area on a grid if you wanted to.
So you could do, yeah, so with stagger, you would actually pass the property grid, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess grid auto, and then from center, I'd assume. But I would imagine I've done it like this because it's one of those, I want to have a go with distribute because I
Mm-hmm.
like trying
Yeah.
out the different utilities. So like, I hadn't used pipe before, or like quickset is another one that's like pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
But I hadn't used those utils before, so I tried to find ways to use all these utilities. I was going to write something about it at some point, but it hasn't
Yeah.
materialized yet. But the yeah, I think Stagger's probably the better option because it's semantically probably more intuitive to write stagger and then
I
write.
totally understand where you're coming from now, where you just wanted to try something and you were doing it.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if you had like a specific reason why you picked it versus like
No,
stagger.
so I think
that,
it would
that
be
makes sense.
like it's kind of good in a sense as if you wanted to do. You probably use a distribute perhaps if you wanted to do something like actually distribute a value across like a load of things. So I don't know, like a
Yeah,
hue
I've
or
used
something
it,
that's
and
not
I'll
being
have to try to.
animated.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find. I know I've used distribute before on one of mine. Why did I use it?
Yeah, if you've got a good use case, I'm all. I was gonna say all ears, but I'm all eyes really.
Let's see if I can find one. We can talk about some other stuff while I try to find one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
because
But I.
yeah, the stagger stuff's really cool, and that was like, and I think the interesting thing is, and I think if you dig into starting to do like more staggers and then distributions, then that's what leads you to that magical like animating the animation, because at
Yeah.
some point you're gonna want to work out how to do the perfect loop, and
Okay.
it's tricky.
Okay, I did find the pin. When GreenSock 3 first came out, I did a article for Co-Drops, which is like a popular online thing where they have like they show off like newer stuff. And I was also trying to learn the different utilities. And so when I did it, I distributed. So I took I was scaling something, so I had several different things that were going to scale. And I said, hey, the base is going to be 0.5, amount is 2, and then I scaled each thing up. And so they started at like 0.5, and then each little center ball went up to 2. And so I will put this in the, because my thing doesn't want to screen share, so I will put it in the chat.
That's a much better example of using distribute.
I like the grid, like how you did it and how it came up. So that's what I was wondering. I was like,
that makes like I guess if you think of distribute in a sense of like you're distributing a value for something that's actually changing. Whereas for me, I was like, I wonder if I could use distribute to like calculate the delay, which is kind of what I've done instead, which is like a kind of weird way of doing it. But yeah, just shows a way of doing it, I guess.
I'm laughing at Angela's comment in the chat. She's like, animate the animated animation.
It's the only way. It's the only way. I've been trying to do that more with like, just trying to thrash out this technique because I think the first time I looked at it, I was like, this makes no sense in my head. And then, but it's like, once again, it will just go back to like the point of, I like that though. I like looking at something and like being like, I have no idea what the hell is going on here. Like, but I want to know. I want to understand it. So I'm still at that point with this demo because I've had to put in the forum today again. I'm like, yeah, I've got it this far, but I've broken it again. Like, can you help me? Jack free.
I think that's a good thing to touch on, though. I don't think everyone has to be this way to be able to animate or work with GreenSock, but from what I've noticed when I've like taught people and I've done courses and stuff, is that people willing to not know exactly what they're doing when they're going into it and just being able to like say like, okay, I'm gonna try this and see what happens, usually enjoy it more. So you don't have to have that kind of mentality to be able to animate. Like you can learn these things and just animate, but when you're okay going in, like I think probably Jay is the same way when we do our pins or our code pins and stuff, that when we initially go in, whatever we have as the end product is not probably what we like started out with, because a lot of times you go in and you just like, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to try this. And then you tweak it from there. And I think having that mentality usually helps you continue on with animating and wanting to do it, enjoying it versus just having to do it.
I was going to say, it probably like, I just thought of that funny, like, you know, like the fridge magnet or whatever it is, like, like it helps to be like you don't have to be crazy, but it helps to work here or whatever that saying. I think you know the one I want to work. But the that makes complete sense. I'd probably say like some of my favorite demos or demos that I've done are actually things that weren't meant to look like that at all. Like they're just happy accidents, like things that have just like, oh, that happened and that wasn't meant to happen, and it just like came out of, oh, I threw the wrong property in. Oh, actually, that looks quite cool. That often happens as well. Like if I'm like, I'll come up with some direction I want to do something. So when I do so I tend to try and do this live stream like once, twice a week where I make something completely random, but I never go in like scripted. It's like I'll go in with just an idea, like a line of words that I'm like, yeah, we're going to do something. And I'll have like a vague idea. But then if like the audience or whoever's watching is like, oh, what if it did that? Or what if it did this? And I'll be like, oh, that's cool. And then, you know, you just vibe off an idea and it becomes something. Like that's kind of, that kind of mindset or like that willingness to just kind of see what happens really helps, I think, if you're going to do animation, because you might do something completely different and then be like, oh, actually, that looks all right. Like, that looks good.
Yeah. There are principles in animation. We've talked about this before that you can follow and that you should kind of know about. So they're called the 12 principles of animation. They are a bit different because this was originally for like TV. And so there are different ways to apply it to the web, but there's lots of articles online of how people have taken it and applied it to the web. But when you know those general principles, that's when you have that flexibility to start playing around. So when we were talking at the beginning about easings, a lot of times when you think, oh, I'm going to use this easing, and you're like, look at how I expected it to look. I know that this should kind of be doing this. I know that this should start out slower and go faster to make it more look and follow these principles depending on what you're doing, or start out fast and go slow. But that's not working like I think. And so then that's when you can start going in and playing around with those easings or the different things of squashing stuff a little, or growing things. Once you know those principles, then you start to understand where you can play around and go from there with those.
Just I just pinged a link. So that link I fired in to the chat is one that I really like that article. It's like this whole good bad like UX. Like it's kind of like the 12 principles of motion but applied to UI. And
Yeah, I go into that one a lot in my LinkedIn course because it's so good.
Yeah, it's pretty.
It's like
It's pretty good.
This is really good. Yeah.
Plus, it has like really nice little animations. But yeah, that's one that I tend to mention a lot. Especially when you first starting out, it kind of helps to understand because you see it a lot, and I'm the same. Like I look back at old animations and I think, why did I use it like that? Like because it's the default. That's why.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Like you're learning the tools, so don't expect to make Pixar on your first day, I guess is probably the takeaway from that.
The lamp.
Yeah, I think that's where you will see the difference between people who have been animating for a while and you see animations and you're like, whoa, like that looks really like there's just something about that animation that you're just kind of like, what is it that makes it so exciting? And it's because they do understand usually like those principles, and then they've worked around those principles and within those like confines and kind of pushed from there and decided like, okay, no, when you're doing this, this needs to squash and stretch and this needs to have this easing and stuff like that. And that's where you get those animations that feel just more like exciting, I guess, or real, or that you like more versus other animations that might be on the web.
Yeah, like I'm still learning that as I go as well. Like I think timings and things like that, that's like what differentiates, I think, is what you're getting at. Like you can tell someone's real good at their craft with animation when they get their timing like bang on and it looks. And I know myself, like I'm sometimes get it right, but all the time I probably don't.
I know the ones that I've done it right because someone has said, "Oh, I really like that animation," versus other ones I've shared with people with, like,
Yeah,
that's not quite right.
That's something you kind of hone over time. I think like you'll be able to kind of look at something and be like, yeah, it kind of looks right. Like it's the same with anything though. You'd be like the amount of times I'll be like, I wonder how this actually looks. Like I'll throw it in the air or something, or I'll and then you get an idea. Or you end up like watching like slowed down videos, or like I'm not sure if they're still in here, but someone that watches my stream recommended GIF Scrubber, and like that's a game changer because I can just like go in, I can break everything down frame by frame, and I can just see like, oh, that's how that was working, or like that's how they've done this, and it helps to learn like by breaking down something and seeing it. Yeah, I'm trying to think of those tools, those hacks that help.
Yeah.
No,
especially with GIFs as well. If you pull a GIF down and open it in like preview, you get all of the frames anyway. Like you can just like cycle through them, which is kind of interesting. But we didn't really say anything about CSS animation. We kind of just said you could do it, and then we just went into like GreenSock and SVG and stuff.
That's all good. It just means we can chat about it another time too.
Yeah, we'll have to do the actual CSS animation stream. We'll do that one.
Yep. Yes, we definitely will.
Yeah, I think it'd be fun to build something next time maybe. Given
we could totally do that.
Because I think it'd be fun because like you and Christina know this stuff pretty well. I'm pretty new to animation. It'd be kind of fun to just build something and then kind of like pair because we pair program on the stream too, and so it's kind of same thing, you know. Be kind of just interesting to see what you'd be like. Oh no, do this because X Y Z or whatever and stuff.
The
But yeah.
the original idea I had, I didn't have time, but I was gonna say we could have animated the dev logo and done like a
Okay.
stroke dash offset, and we could have done it in CSS and then done it in GreenSock and shown you like, oh, and then you could have
Oh.
been like, yeah, that was much easier.
Yep. Yes, that's a perfect example of the like use of the plugins that we keep harping on about is that you can do the stroke offsets in CSS and with a lot of things it's not that hard, but when you use the GreenSock has a draw SVG plugin that you can use, and when you use that and you're just setting this point from like here to here and it just does it for you, you're like, oh.
Yeah, that almost
Also,
seems like
like,
a no-brainer.
yeah, like getting your timings right, because if you were to
Yeah.
do that, so what I initially thought was like you'd do like a D, then the top of the D, then the out of the E, like just how you hand write it. So there's like a thought process there of you need to actually break up that SVG into the little parts that you would draw, and then
Okay.
you can do it with CSS, and then you can use like variables to offset it. I did it in this, so I did like a, let me find it. I did the CSS tic-tac-toe.
Okay.
And then where is it? Bear with me. Too many tabs. It's a common problem.
Yeah, I got a
Yes.
notification.
So
My computer's saying that Discord, Streamlabs, and Firefox are using significant resources. It's not just like, yeah, there's a lot of RAM. It's like significant. I'm like, oh, thanks.
I'll give it the time for that. So yeah, that. So I did like this CSS tic-tac-toe, and in that I do like drawing SVG. Let me bring up the demo. Is it that one? It's that one. Sorry, I'm just doing this in the other window. I can bring it up, actually. Share screen. Share screen. Hear the fans kick in.
Yeah. The airplane's
Love to
taking
see
off.
it.
All right. Okay, cool. Yeah. So what's a defs element in the SVG?
Um, I don't actually know what
Def
I
stands
believe it's
for.
definitions, but
Yeah, just
Yeah.
I believe it's definitions. But I have to look that up and say it's one of those. I just know it, so I just use it. Like G,
well,
right? G is group.
All
But
right. The
you could
defs
just
element is used to store graphical objects that will be used at a later time. So you could see in there he had defs and then he
okay.
had the use. So he
Okay.
had the line, which was inside the defs, and then he could use that with the use later on.
Okay,
I
so it's
tend to
like
think of like
templates.
So, yeah, sometimes you'll
yeah,
have gradients in there that people use. So if they have a gradient, they'll have that in there, and then that
or a
gets
clip
like
path.
hooked up to another object. There's like all kinds of things you can put inside the defs.
Okay, cool.
You could throw a clip path in there or like a
Yeah.
mask or
Hmm.
I tend to think of it like so defs is like definitions, but I just use it like I chuck everything in there that I'm not gonna look at. So I'll even throw like because you can actually put a style tag in there, like a CSS style tag, and you can actually run an animation within an SVG file and then like use that. So that's like a trick I use on my GitHub profile. So I have like
Okay.
an animated SVG, but it works because there's a CSS style tag actually inside the SVG, which is kind of like a nifty trick. But yeah, this was the demo I was on about. So this is like these SVGs are noughts and crosses, but they're actually, and they're probably not going to come through very good on stream, but they're
Excellent.
actually drawn with the stroke dash offset. So you can see like the
Okay.
cross would actually be two paths.
Okay.
The first path, then the second path, and that's kind of like how you think about it. So like for the dev logo, you would think like, right, how would I actually write D, E, and then you'd like break it down. So and then you could just split that up into little chunks of like a timeline and then squish it together and then sort out your timing so it feels like natural. So although it seems like pretty straightforward, it would actually be like there's more to it than just yeah, I'm just gonna draw that with this. Like you actually have to think about it. You have to like break it down, do your timings.
Yeah, one of the things, if you don't do it right in the editor when you're drawing it initially, like even the way that you put the strokes, like from the top to the bottom or the bottom to, like that can determine like how your animation is when you're using like the draw SVG or CSS, is that if you're wanting it to start from the top to the bottom, then you should draw from the top to the bottom, and
Okay.
just making life easier that way.
Yeah, it'll make your life easier. You can get around it. Like you could
Yeah.
just do the stroke dash offset going in the negative direction, but yeah, it'll just be like, wow, this is awkward to work out. But yeah, that I can't remember where it is in that YouTube video. It's probably about 30 minutes in. I go into like how you can do that with CSS. But that's just CSS. There's no SVG. There's no GreenSock in there. There is SVG. That's how it works. But yeah, like
Okay.
you would start having to work out dash arrays and dash offsets yourself, and it's kind of
Cool.
I think it's kind of good to know that stuff, and I guess that's probably something we didn't really talk about, but like knowing how to do it with CSS is like, or knowing how to draw SVG or do these things at a foundational level kind of makes sense, so you can learn it. So that's where like the courses that go through all foundational stuff are like brilliant, because you can pick up a lot. But as soon as you've got enough that gives you a taste, like start jumping in and messing with things. Like that's how I go about it. Like I'm terrible. I can't sit and listen to people. I really struggle. Like my attention span is awful. But if I'm doing it myself, I can do it. And I'll be as disciplined as anything. Like I'll go off and spend hours doing stuff. But yeah, like lectures are not for me.
Yeah.
Lectures and courses and tutorials I struggle with. Like I want my answers now, and I want to write code, and I want to see something happen. That's just how I am.
There's a question in the chat from Ali Pixel saying, when you want to share an idea or demo with people, what do you prefer, writing an article or making a video?
Well, unfortunately, I've stitched myself up because now I'm trying to do all of them at once. So I was chatting with a friend of mine. You've probably seen him on Twitter, Danny Thompson.
Yeah.
He's like he does a lot of like motivational stuff, and he's like yeah, he's really good at all this kind of thing. And we were chatting the other day on a Spaces, and
Okay.
I said to him like, oh, like, because they were saying you've got all this content and you could like share it, but you don't do it right. Like you're not doing it well enough. And I was like, yeah, that sounds right. Like I've got ideas for days, but I'm a terrible businessman and I'm terrible at marketing. So yeah, just don't hook me up for that.
But I
But
typically do. No, go ahead.
and he said his answer to that was, like you should really, because I like seeing visual things, so I try and actually like, and Twitter is the biggest place, right? So I would try and just show you something visual and think like, people want to see that. But Danny's answer was actually a lot different. He was you should get people involved, showing them how to do something quick, like a code snippet or something, then show them the result, then build upon that, like show them a video, show them a blog post. And that's kind of what I've been trying to do this year. So like I try and make a demo, make a blog post, make a video if I can, although my YouTube I need to actually start doing that. And then I'll put it in my newsletter as well. So like I'm not making as many demos. I am in my head, but they're just not like out there yet, because I'm actually trying to spend more time creating the bits around it, because then it's like it's actually more useful. Because it's great that if you can make all these ridiculous things, but if people don't actually know how to do it, or people want to know how to do it as well so they can do it themselves, it's kind of hard to like just like the output is just like I'm just distributing and you're not getting anything from it. Like 'cause you look at the code and you think, what on earth is going on in here? So yeah, I guess my first call is video. That tends to be what I go for, but supposedly I'm doing it all wrong, so don't listen to me.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, I used to be the same way where I just would put out tons of code pins and I would just share them on Twitter and that's kind of what I did. And then I kind of more the approach Danny said. And so that's kind of what I do. I do like I will create something, I will think through how to communicate it to someone. I'll usually share like little bits of like as I'm going through and creating something, like if I want to put something on Twitter, then
Yeah.
I'll create a blog post, and then those tend to turn into videos or courses. That's how I've gotten like courses like on LinkedIn and things, is because I'm sharing in that kind of manner from there. People see it.
I find it, I don't know, like I find it really hard to gauge, and that's why I'm not super into the idea of creating like foundational courses on things because it feels really overwhelming for me to
Yeah.
like personally. I like to try and learn things and push them, and then I find it hard to actually document things because I'll make something like say any of the demos we've like been talking about, and you say about like breaking it down into smaller bits. But the problem is I look at a demo and then I'm like, gosh, there's like 6 blog posts in that, and I think nah, like on to the next one because like my attention span is like I want to make something new now. And that's kind of like the
Yeah.
problem, I guess, the hole I'm in, because I'll be like, someone will be like, oh, is there a tutorial for this? And I'll be like, yeah, I'll write one, but no, I'm on to my next demo,
Yeah.
or I'm on to the next one. And like, it will be in my book. I'm like, yeah, cool, I'll write it. And it's
Yeah.
in there. And I'm trying to get on top of that now, like try and actually give people something like a tutorial or some, even just what I've kind of been toying with the idea of is doing like retrospective videos where I just kind of talk through
Okay.
a demo, like because it's really easy for me to do that. I can just say like, oh, this is how it works, check this out, check this link, because people don't really want to know how do you make a bear turn a checkbox off. They want to know how did you do the animation underneath it, right? Like how did you
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
the mechanics of it. So I'm trying
Yeah.
to think more along those lines, but yeah, it's kind of tricky because it's
I
not
think
really
I
naturally how I work. Like naturally,
Yeah.
I think you're in a good spot though. I don't know if you've seen it recently. The last like probably week I keep seeing on Twitter. I would never bash like beginner stuff because I think we need those, and I've taught a lot of students that need beginner stuff, and I started from nothing. But there's been a lot of people on Twitter talking about like there's so much beginner stuff. There's nothing like intermediate. Like what do you do after that? And there's nothing advanced. I think you're at a good spot to where you can. So I've done a lot of documentation and I've done a lot of things where we've gone back, and what you can do, Jay, as yourself, is that you can, if you want to get into that deeper, like not have to think of the foundational stuff, is that you find good foundational stuff that other people have created. You link people to those things, and then you say, this is the stuff you need to know if you want to start doing,
come to
like
me.
if you want to then do this stuff, and then you just start sharing your stuff, because we do need those intermediate and advanced things. And even when
It's
I've done courses like LinkedIn, they wanted me to do something more intermediate or advanced. They just say, this is what you need to know first before you start
Yeah.
doing this, and then you can go from there.
Yeah, that's a really good idea actually, like a really good point. Because I think that's where I kind of struggle with, because I look at like beginning stuff and like people will say, oh, like, are you gonna do honestly, the one I get asked the most is, are you gonna do a CSS thing or like a
Okay.
course? And I'm like, I look at it and I think that's such a saturated market, right? There's a lot of
Yeah.
people do CSS
Yeah. Yeah.
courses, and I don't want to teach you like every property step by step or how like these things work, because it's not how I learned. I didn't learn like that. I wanted to make things straight away, so I'd be like, my idea of a course would be something like client briefs almost, or like
Okay.
tickets. Like I would create something weird like, hey, it's the first day of the course and here's a Jira ticket and you've got to do this. Like that would be my approach, because I'd want
Yeah.
people to do something like realistic, like applied, like they're at work
I
and
can't
then they
remember his
go through
last
it.
name, but Andre, and I can't remember his last name, does that with his courses. It's all like, hey, I'm boss somebody, and you have to do this. And then he's got
That
a
is
bunch of
awesome.
React
Yeah.
courses.
I
Yeah,
didn't
that's
see you at
perfect. Like
stand up. Where were you? You weren't at stand up.
yeah,
Yeah.
that is perfect. Like that would be how, if I was going to do one, that would be how I'd do it, because I think for me that's how I'd learn, because I think it was really hard, and hats off to people that have created like beginner courses all around, especially like CSS or JavaScript, like the gateway things, because there's so much to cover, and how do you feel like it's a good time to release. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
oh, have I covered enough? Because realistically, from an end user, I want to pay you as little as possible, and I want to know as much as possible in as little time as possible, so I can go off and show off my new skills. Like that's the
Yeah.
reality of it, right? So thinking
Well,
of
I think from your ways that you need to not think of it as a, and I'm here giving you advice. You don't have to take any of this advice, Jay.
this is just a discussion. Like it's not
Christina
something
is
I've
now your
that,
business
like-
manager.
Yeah.
Is that you should
I'm
take
hiring
it from
Christina
the
after this.
because you do such great demos and things. You should take it from the perspective of I'm going to show you how to create this this end thing. Not I'm going to teach you every CSS property.
Yeah.
That's not realistic for what you're doing, and I don't think you have to do that as like I think there's a market for that, and people do that already, and there's a market for someone just wanting to know how to do this thing and how can I do that. And then you just say, this is the end goal for this. This is what we're going to do. I'm going to show you. Like when I did my CSS animation course, they already had CSS animation courses on LinkedIn. So we just linked to that. Balhead did a CSS animation course. Her CSS animation course was not something I was even going to be able to touch compared. We did, hey, this is going to be the end product. You're going to have these certain animations you're going to be able to do at the end of this. If you take my course. And so I think you can do the same kind of approach.
No, it's totally I mean, I'm all ears. I mean, I'm not even saying, I mean, I might do something eventually, but it's more of a discussion like around these things, because it is really interesting to understand what people really look for these days. Because if I think of what I was looking for, but then I'm a terrible person. I did one course. Like I've only ever done one course, which was Wes Boz's grid course. I highly recommend
See,
it.
there's other people like you that don't want to do a whole course. That is your niche market. That is what you should be thinking of, is that like there are other people out there like you. There's so many people who buy Udemy courses and never touch them because no one wants to, they don't want to sit through a course. That's your market. That's who you should market to.
I found that really strange, because it's like one of those things you kind of because I've always made stuff on the side anyway before like I met yourself, or like it's always been a thing. Like I've always done that to learn new things. And I don't know how you feel like when you start actually putting out educational stuff and putting a price on it, it feels really weird.
Yes.
I don't know, like, it feels odd.
Yes.
And then people go, oh, you should charge more for that, and you're like, what, really?
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah,
It's just like something you naturally have in your head, right? So it's really weird.
Yeah.
But it pays off. I bought Josh's CSS course not because I don't know CSS. I know 100% for sure I'm gonna learn something in there, you know. You know, and it's just really good material. Like because that's the other thing. Like I don't know if this is why you're maybe reserved about this too. Is it takes a lot of time to write like a good course or content. It's not just like I almost did a TypeScript course and I aborted because I was like. I just didn't. It didn't fit in with like I had other things going on. I started working at Dev at the time, now Forum. You know, so because it's you know it's not to say that to discourage you, but it's not like just a weekend thing and you're done kind of. It definitely takes a lot of time.
That's the thing, like and that's what I was getting at. Like hats off to people that have done it, because it takes a serious amount of time. Like, and you can build that content up over time. But like, and it's not that I couldn't do it, it's more my attention span just won't allow me to, because I want to make shiny things. So if I said to you today, like, I'm gonna do one, don't worry, I'll do a CSS course, but you might not see it till 2030 because, you know, I'm just constantly trying to do all these other things.
Yeah, you should also look at it the approach that, you know, not everyone has to do a course. There's other ways you can do it. And you do your Twitch stream, you know, you say you have a YouTube channel. There's stuff like that that's just like, it's great content already, and you don't have to have it be a course. Like for me, I know I couldn't do the way like Josh, like we're mentioning, Josh has a CSS course out there. I don't know if you want to link it since we keep talking about it, Nick.
Sure.
Like where he did like, he did the whole platform himself, and he did like, I always go the route of like, though I could maybe make more money if I did it myself, I choose like LinkedIn or something like that, because I know they have a producer, they have like a content manager, they're gonna have me like, hey, I need this stuff at this time, and we can go from there, because I can't like
the least overhead. Like that's the thing.
Can't
So
do
like
all
I,
the
I
other
did the
stuff.
same thing when I took so in the Party Corgi Discord there was like
Yeah.
a Joe, I can't pronounce it, but it's JS Joe. I never
Yeah,
know how
I
to
think
say
it's
his
Joe
second name.
Previte,
Yes.
maybe. I've never said
Yeah.
his real name out loud.
So he did the he put out like a message in there like, oh, we're gonna do this rolling 14-day digital product challenge thing.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, I wanna get involved with that. And that's when I wrote the Move Things with CSS, like the animation ebook. And I was like, I'm gonna do it, 14 days, I'll do it. And even that
Okay.
was like tricky, and I already had all the content really. What I did was I just made like, I can't remember how many demos are in there, probably like 40 code pen demos. I just remade them all with like new assets and new kind of code and stuff, and I gave it a new
Okay.
skin, and I like wrote something actually structured in a PDF. But like even that was really hard, and that was like
Yeah.
not. And I stuck that on Gumroad because I didn't want to have to do like my own payments and stuff like that,
Yeah.
my own platform. And
Yeah.
I just think like hats off to people that build these huge courses, like fair play, because
Yeah.
it takes a lot of time. Even the screencasting, like I know uh, you must relate to that, Christina. Like doing animation screencasts is like it takes
Yeah.
time to come up with stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, the demos and things are usually kind of what
Like
take.
that.
Again, the nice thing about LinkedIn was like the demos I did and I had to do those and I created those. But when I was talking about stuff, so like I talk about the 12 animation, like the 12 principles of animation, I talk about several things. Before we get into that, I could say like, hey, this is the kind of thing I want you to show, and they had people who created the little like, okay, so this is squash and stretch, and like I gave them an example of like squash and
Okay.
stretch that I'd want them to create, and then they created it. So it's like one of those things where it's like, here you go, like you do that,
That is
and so
perfect though.
yeah,
Someone to just be like, yeah, here's one. We'll just throw
yep,
that in. Don't worry. Like that
yep,
is, yeah, that's really good. Because when you try and, because I always think, so I'm relatively new to doing the YouTube kind of stuff, but I started putting things out there, and I did that like tic-tac-toe one. It probably took me like a weekend to record that, and I put it up, and
Okay.
it's like 40 minutes of video. But I struggle with like doing it like very full. I'd rather just sit back and be like, yeah, now we're going to do this and just type it away like I'm doing a stream,
mhm,
which is kind of
Yeah.
how I
yeah,
Yeah.
prefer it. But when you see people do like all these high production quality stuff as well, that's another thing. I'm like, wow, like fair play.
yeah.
Like you've put some serious effort into doing all this, because mine is literally I stick an OG card as the thumbnail and then I'm in the corner and I'm typing and that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I like streaming as well. I honestly don't have the time. I mean, I have a YouTube channel, but I basically just download my Twitch stream if I, you know,
Yeah, check it
uh,
out.
it's for me at least, that, and I'm not really a content creator per se, like like all of you, but yeah, I like the
You
format
are.
of the
You put
stream.
content every Wednesday.
Well, yeah. But I just
You're
like the
doing a
format of
talk
the
later
stream.
today.
You're doing it
Uh,
right now as well.
yeah, it's true.
I'm
It's true.
offended.
Yeah, it's true. But yeah, no, I just like the format of the stream because it's kind of like there's not too much to worry about, and people expect things to go wrong too. So whereas like if you have a
Nice.
polished video, it's like you have to fix everything, and so
That's what I really like about that as well, because I started streaming because people suggested it like last year when things got like locked down, and I was like, okay, I'll give
Hmm.
it a go. And
yeah,
I actually really like it because it's almost killing two birds with one stone for me, because I'll be making that thing anyway, so
Hmm.
I might as well flick a camera on and actually say hello to people at the same time. It's like a
yeah,
really, so it's kind of a win-win. But you still get people that do like very like scripted streams as well. Like, be like today I'm going to show you this, and we're going to walk exactly through this, and it's
Yeah.
like,
yeah.
yes, it's all right. But in those cases, I'd probably just record a video. I think just
Yeah.
put that out.
Yeah.
Depends what you're looking for. I guess the good thing with streaming is like you have like the interactive kind of side of it, and people get involved. Like on my channel, I have the ability for people to like fire animations I've made, so like they're just in the
Okay.
overlay, so people can like fire rockets or like air horns and stuff, and they just come up over the OBS like overlay, which is pretty cool.
Yeah,
So
I
yeah,
gotta
there's that
get
whole
on
side
stuff
to it.
like that.
We can do that on a stream. We can
I
do
was gonna
that.
say, let's do that on the next stream because
Yeah,
I
that'd
can
be
help with
cool.
the animation, but I don't know that part of it. So we can totally
Yeah, that'd be
It's really
cool.
fun.
Yeah.
have
You can do
stream
like
animation.
especially because you've got Christina to do a load of GreenSock animation stuff. So you just be like, make a GreenSock
Yeah.
animation,
Let's do
hook
it.
it up to Comfy.js, use a browser source on the OBS, and then just like let users type something to trigger it. That's
Yeah,
pretty
it's
much
like
what it boils down to.
it's like webhooks or something, or
So there's just like there's a package called Comfy.js, and what
okay.
you do is, I've not looked into how it works, but I imagine it's just using a webhook, and
Okay.
essentially it just listens for the chat commands coming in. So you do
Okay.
something like comfy.init, and then you pass it like the channel username on Twitch. So you just put in like thePracticalDev, and then you get an event listener for every chat message or chat command. So it'll be like
Mm.
exclamation mark, I don't know, hey, and then if someone typed that in, and you could check which user it is or if they're a subscriber, and then you
Okay.
could be like, right, you're a sub, so we'll fire this animation. You could do like something with the dev wording or something, or like something cool that
Okay.
flew out, or yeah,
A
Oh,
sloth.
it's happening. It's happening.
yeah, the sloth. That's perfect.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
is
yeah.
perfect. You could do
That's
like something really funny as well. You could just have like the sloth just appear randomly at some point on the screen, like in and out.
yeah, just like, hey, what's
That'd
up?
be awesome.
No, that's awesome. That's a good segue too, because I definitely would love to have you back on the stream. Um,
Hmm.
we're hitting about 3:30, so I'd say it's probably about a good time to
Yeah.
wrap up. As well, my daughter would probably appreciate if I pick her up at school at some point. But well, I guess I could be a bad parent. I mean, we'll play it by ear, I guess. But I
We'll
think I'll
let you
go
be a
pick her up.
good parent. We'll wrap it up, but we'll have Jay back on if
Watch
Jay
the
wants to
stream.
come back on.
Yeah, yeah. If you'll have us, Jay. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
that's awesome.
100%. Yeah. I
No,
think
this
it's
was this,
we said this the other day anyway. We said like it'll be pretty easy for us to just keep going, like
Yep.
yeah,
naturally
yeah.
anyway. So yeah,
Oh
I'm
no, I
down for
could
that.
totally
I'm
keep
down for that.
talking and talking, but yeah, it's I guess that's one danger of the stream. You forget you're in a stream, you're just kind of talking. So
It will, especially because we're in Discord. It's just like, yep, we'll just keep chatting for ages.
yeah. Cool. Well, I'm gonna drop your links so people can give you a follow or check out all the stuff you're working on in the chat. And yeah, I just wanted to
There's
say thanks
links to
again.
the stuff he's done on Egghead. There's links to his book. There's links to his code pin. Check all these things out.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Nick.
Buy his
Yeah.
stuff. It's pretty good, I'm sure. It's got a bear on it, so
I think there's bear merch.
It's
bear
cheap. It's
merch.
cheap. I'm a
I'm
terrible
gonna buy a bear
businessman.
t-shirt. Cool, cool. Well, that's awesome. Well, thanks again, and I've lost the stream software on my screen because I have too many windows open. Cool. All
Oh
right.
no.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks
Bye.
everyone.